Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Edison, and I'm here to guide you into a peaceful slumber. If you find this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to know where you're from and what time it is as you unwind. So settle in, get cozy, and let the relaxation begin. Growing up in a military family meant constant change. But Utah's mountains provided stability in my ever-shifting childhood. My father served as a technical sergeant at Hill Air Force Base, which stationed us in northern Utah throughout most of my formative years. The rugged terrain surrounding our temporary home became our weekend sanctuary, particularly Farmington Canyon, with its dramatic elevation changes and dense forests. The landscape transformed with the seasons. Summer brought verdant hillsides dotted with wildflowers. Autumn painted the mountainsides with brilliant crimson and amber hues. Winter draped everything in pristine snowfall, and spring introduced tender green shoots pushing through melting frost. But autumn held a special magic for our family outings. The canyon's transformation each September into October created a natural cathedral of color that drew us back repeatedly. My father, James, despite his military precision in most matters, harbored a profound appreciation for wilderness that seemed at odds with his structured professional life. My mother, Catherine, supported these excursions with methodical planning and preparation, packing provisions with the same careful attention she gave to maintaining our household during my father's occasional deployments. My older brother Patrick and younger sister Joanna completed our family unit, along with our two loyal dogs, Rusty, a chocolate Labrador with graying muzzle, and Scout, a younger border collie mix with boundless energy. The canyon road itself demanded respect. A narrow dirt path carved into the mountainside, it twisted upward with hairpin turns that left passengers clutching door handles with whitened knuckles. On one side, the road hugged sheer rock faces that occasionally shed small stones onto the path. On the other, a precipitous drop offered unobstructed views of the valley below, breathtaking but terrifying when considered from the perspective of vehicle safety. During busier seasons, passing another vehicle required careful negotiation and sometimes necessitated one driver backing up to a wider section. I recall pressing myself against the car door during these maneuvers, peering down at the miniature trees hundreds of feet below, my stomach tightening as vertigo threatened to overwhelm me. Despite the treacherous approach, or perhaps partly because of it, Farmington Canyon represented adventure and escape in my young mind. The journey transformed us, changing my father from a stern military man to an enthusiastic guide, my mother from a worried homemaker to a confident outdoorswoman, and us children from bickering siblings to united explorers. In retrospect, I recognize how these early experiences shaped my relationship with nature, teaching me both deep appreciation and healthy caution. The mountains never promised safety, only authenticity. They stood indifferent to human presence, neither welcoming nor rejecting us. We were merely temporary visitors in an ancient landscape that would remain long after our departure. This understanding hadn't fully formed in my 11-year-old mind during that autumn of 1994, but I already sensed the dual nature of wilderness, its beauty and its danger inextricably linked. If I had truly comprehended what awaited us on that particular October weekend, perhaps I would have fabricated an illness or school obligation to avoid the trip altogether. Instead, I bounded into the garage that Friday afternoon, eager to help load camping gear into our aging station wagon, blissfully unaware that the mountains held terrors beyond my imagination. The camping trip began like most others, with organized chaos. My father had secured a rare 3-day weekend, unusual for his maintenance supervision role at the base. My mother viewed the opportunity as providential, noting how perfectly it aligned with peak foliage season. School had released us for a teacher workday that Friday, providing the perfect opportunity for an extended wilderness excursion. What made this trip different was the sleeping arrangement. Typically, Dad's chronic back pain, the result of years working on aircraft in awkward positions, dictated our accommodation choices. We either completed day hikes, concluding with the comfort of our own beds, or secured basic cabin rentals for overnight stays. But this autumn marked a departure from tradition. 2 weeks prior, my father had spotted a vintage canvas tent at a neighborhood garage sale, an olive-drab relic from the 1970s that smelled faintly of basement storage but remained structurally sound. "It's military grade," he'd proudly announced upon bringing it home, despite my mother's skeptical expression. "Proper ventilation, waterproof floor, and enough room for all of us." His enthusiasm proved infectious, particularly for me. The prospect of sleeping under canvas with nothing but nylon and aluminum separating us from the wilderness ignited my imagination. Drew camping, like the adventurers in my dog-eared nature magazines experienced. Friday morning arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp air that hinted at the coming winter but remained comfortable enough for outdoor exploration. We packed methodically, following my father's military-influenced system. Sleeping bags were rolled tightly and secured with nylon straps. Food supplies were organized in plastic containers, separated by meal. Clothing was packed in individual duffels, one per family member, with Joanna's significantly larger, despite her smaller size. "Got the first aid kit?" Dad asked Mom, checking items against his handwritten list. "Right here," she responded, patting a red canvas bag. "Added extra bandages and the new antibiotic ointment." "Excellent." He nodded approvingly. "Patrick, check the flashlights. Make sure batteries are fresh." This methodical preparation continued until mid-afternoon, when we finally piled into the station wagon. The dogs sensed our excitement, circling the vehicle and whining until permitted to jump into the cargo area, where they promptly created nests among the sleeping bags. The drive to Farmington Canyon took approximately an hour from our Layton suburb. Initial highways gave way to increasingly narrow roads, eventually transitioning to the infamous dirt track that ascended the canyon. As always, this portion of the journey demanded complete concentration from my father and produced tense silence from the rest of us. "Keep your eyes on the road." "Dad," Patrick murmured unnecessarily as we navigated a particularly tight curve with an exposed edge. "Always do." "Son," came the measured response, though I noticed his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. By late afternoon, we reached our destination, a small clearing near Farmington Creek, where the gurgling water provided constant ambient sound. The site offered privacy, located away from the more popular camping areas, closer to the canyon entrance. My father had discovered this spot years earlier during a solo hike and returned to it whenever possible, considering it our unofficial family territory. The clearing provided just enough level ground for our tent, with space remaining for a small fire pit ringed by rocks. Tall pines surrounded us on 3 sides, their branches creating a partial canopy that filtered the diminishing sunlight into dappled patterns. The creek formed the 4th boundary, its clear mountain water flowing over smooth rocks with hypnotic consistency. We unloaded efficiently, establishing camp before darkness descended. The tent proved more challenging than anticipated, its vintage design lacking the color-coded simplicity of modern camping equipment. Nevertheless, my father's determination eventually yielded a structurally sound shelter, if somewhat lopsided in appearance. "Home, sweet home," he declared, stepping back to admire his handiwork. Scout and Rusty explored the perimeter, occasionally disappearing into the underbrush only to return minutes later, tongues lolling with excitement. Their obvious joy amplified our own, creating a festive atmosphere as we completed our settlement. As we organized sleeping arrangements inside the tent, I claimed a corner position, placing my sleeping bag where the canvas wall met the ground. This location offered a small, triangular pocket perfect for stashing my flashlight and pocket knife, a recent birthday gift from my grandfather that my mother permitted me to carry. Only on camping trips, the fading daylight urged us to complete our preparations. My father gathered wood for the fire, while my mother unpacked dinner supplies. Patrick and Joanna filled water containers at the creek, and I arranged stones for our fire pit, carefully creating a circular barrier as I'd been taught in Boy Scouts. None of us suspected that this ordinary beginning would evolve into something so drastically different from our previous expeditions. The mountains revealed nothing of their intentions as we settled into our temporary wilderness home, laughing and planning the weekend's activities with innocent enthusiasm. Dinner that evening consisted of hot dogs roasted over open flames, baked beans heated in their can, nestled among the coals, and potato chips, a traditional first-night camping meal that represented luxury to our young palates. The simplicity of food cooked outdoors somehow transformed ordinary ingredients into extraordinary cuisine. We sat on fallen logs positioned around the fire pit, passing condiments and sharing observations about the day. "Did you notice the eagle soaring above us during setup?" my father asked, gesturing toward the ridgeline to our east. "Golden eagle," Patrick corrected with teenager certainty. "You can tell by the wingspan and coloration. Whatever it was beautiful," my mother contributed, her expression softening in the firelight. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by the snap of burning wood and occasional barks from the dogs, pursuing scents at the clearing's edge. As the sky darkened to indigo, then black, stars emerged with surprising brightness. Away from city lights, the heavens revealed themselves in spectacular detail, the Milky Way stretching across the sky like spilled sugar. "Can I tell the story about the lost miners?" Patrick asked, his voice dropping dramatically as he glanced toward me and Joanna. "Not too scary," Mom cautioned, giving him a meaningful look. "It's history, not horror," he protested, though his mischievous smile suggested otherwise. Patrick proceeded to recount a supposedly true tale about 19th century prospectors who vanished in these mountains during an early snowstorm. According to local legend, their ghosts still searched for shelter on particularly cold nights. While I recognized his storytelling techniques, the lowered voice, strategic pauses, and widened eyes, his narrative still produced the desired effect. A shiver traversed my body, despite the fire's warmth. "They say you can hear their pickaxes hitting rock deep in the mountain," he concluded ominously. "Tap, tap, tap. Getting closer when you least expect it." "That's enough, Patrick," my father interrupted, noting Joanna's wide eyes. "Remember, we're sleeping outdoors tonight." The conversation shifted to less frightening topics: school projects, Dad's work challenges, and plans for exploring the surrounding area tomorrow. Yet Patrick's story lingered in my consciousness, coloring my perception of the darkened forest beyond our fire's illumination. Shadows seemed to move among the trees, though rationally I understood this as merely flames casting flickering light against trunks and branches. After dinner, we cleaned up according to my father's strict outdoor ethics, all trash collected, food remnants buried away from camp, cooking implements washed in the creek and dried. "Leave no trace," he often reminded us. "The wilderness isn't our garbage can." The evening concluded with marshmallows roasted over glowing embers. My father demonstrated proper technique, patience, and slow rotation, rather than plunging the marshmallow directly into flames. Despite his instruction, Joanna's marshmallow inevitably caught fire, requiring quick intervention to prevent complete incineration. "You've got to pay attention," I advised her with assumed expertise, despite having burned numerous marshmallows myself over the years. As the fire diminished to glowing coals, my father checked his watch and announced bedtime. "Early start tomorrow if we want to hike to the upper falls." We doused the fire thoroughly, my father pouring water from our canteen, while Patrick and I stirred the embers with sticks, ensuring complete extinguishment. Steam rose with a satisfying hiss, carrying the scent of wet ash. Safety procedures completed, we retreated to the tent, brushing teeth using water bottles and spitting into the surrounding vegetation. Inside our canvas shelter, Sleeping bags were arranged in neat rows, parents on the outer edges, children between them. The dogs settled at the foot of our makeshift beds, Rusty's experienced calm contrasting with Scout's restless circling before finally settling. My father switched off the lantern, plunging us into darkness, relieved only by moonlight filtering through the canvas. The material transformed into a pale screen displaying shadow puppetry as branches moved in the gentle night breeze. Ambient sounds intensified in the darkness, the perpetual gurgle of the creek, rustling leaves, and occasional unidentifiable woodland noises. "Good night, everyone," my mother's voice came softly from the darkness. "Sleep well." A chorus of responses followed, mine among them, though my mind remained active, processing the day's experiences and anticipating tomorrow's adventures. Eventually, the rhythmic sounds of nature combined with physical fatigue from the day's activities lulled me toward unconsciousness. My last conscious thought before drifting off centered on gratitude for this rare tent camping experience and the perfect autumn weather that made it possible. Sleep claimed me gradually, peaceful and deep, a stark contrast to the awakening that awaited me later that night. I cannot precisely identify what initially disturbed my slumber. Perhaps it was a subtle change in temperature as the night deepened, or an unusual gap in the ambient sounds that had accompanied my descent into sleep. Whatever the trigger, consciousness returned abruptly, my eyes opening to unfamiliar darkness. Momentary disorientation gripped me. The softness beneath me wasn't my mattress. The ceiling above wasn't adorned with glow-in-the-dark stars. Then reality reasserted itself. The camping trip, Farmington Canyon, our vintage tent. I blinked, allowing my vision to adjust to the minimal light filtering through the canvas. The first aberration I noticed was Rusty's posture. The normally relaxed Labrador sat rigidly alert at the tent's entrance, his attention focused outside. A continuous, low-frequency growl emanated from his throat. Not the playful warning he offered squirrels or rabbits, but something deeper, more primal. His silhouette showed raised hackles along his spine, transforming his familiar outline into something almost prehistoric. Beside him, Scout mirrored this vigilance, though the younger dog's anxiety manifested as trembling rather than vocalization. Both animals stared fixedly at the tent flap, as though tracking movement beyond our shelter. My initial assumption aligned with Patrick's earlier hypothesis, nocturnal wildlife investigating our campsite. The mountains housed various creatures that might find our food remnants enticing, despite our careful cleanup. Raccoons, foxes, perhaps even a black bear. While concerning, such visitors represented a natural component of wilderness camping. This rationalization collapsed when I discerned the distinctive sound piercing the night's background noise. Footsteps, human footsteps. The unmistakable crunch of boots on forest detritus, deliberate, measured, and unquestionably bipedal. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. Someone circled our campsite. The realization paralyzed me. My muscles contracted involuntarily, rendering me immobile in my sleeping bag. Even breathing seemed dangerous, as though the slight movement might attract unwanted attention from whatever prowled outside. The footsteps continued their perimeter patrol, approaching the creek side before retreating toward the denser forest. Occasionally they stopped entirely, creating moments of excruciating silence during which my imagination supplied horrifying possibilities. Why would someone circle our tent in the middle of the night? What did they want? The questions generated terrifying scenarios in my young mind. I strained to discern any additional information, voices, mechanical sounds, anything that might contextualize this nocturnal visitor. Nothing supplemented the footsteps except the continuing canine warning system. Rusty's growl deepened as the steps approached our tent's entrance, the sound emanating from deep in his chest. The unknown visitor paused directly outside our shelter. Even through canvas, I sensed a presence. Someone standing motionless, perhaps evaluating our vulnerability. The dog's reactions intensified proportionally, Scout joining Rusty's vocal alarm with a higher-pitched contribution. I desperately wanted to wake my parents, but feared attracting attention. Instead, I remained paralyzed, listening as metal clinked against metal, perhaps our cooking equipment being examined, or worse, the car being tested for entry. My mind flashed to valuables left in the vehicle, my mother's purse containing identification and credit cards, my father's wallet in the glove compartment, Patrick's portable CD player. The footsteps resumed, now accompanied by additional sounds, rustling through our supplies, the zip of a backpack being opened, plastic containers shifting against each other. Our visitor rifled through our campsite with disturbing confidence. An unexpected sound finally broke my terrified inertia, a gentle pressure on my shoulder. I nearly gasped aloud before recognizing my father's hand. His face materialized beside mine, finger pressed to lips signaling silence. His eyes communicated what words couldn't. He too was awake, aware, and formulating a response. A subtle shift in tension throughout the tent suggested everyone had awakened. My mother's controlled breathing sounded from across the tent, while Patrick's sleeping bag rustled as he undoubtedly reached for the pocket knife he insisted on keeping nearby. Outside, the intruder continued investigating our belongings with methodical thoroughness. Each sound painted partial images in my mind, our cooler being opened, camp chairs being shifted, something metal tapping against stone. The casual entitlement in these actions somehow magnified their menace. This wasn't a panicked thief grabbing accessible items, but someone comfortable taking their time in violating our temporary home. Without warning, Scout's growl transformed into a sharp, authoritative bark, the sound he produced when genuinely threatened rather than merely alert. The sudden noise shattered the night's uneasy equilibrium. The footsteps instantly changed character, no longer measured but rapid and urgent. They retreated from our immediate vicinity, crashing through underbrush with newfound haste. The dogs lunged against the tent flap, responding to the movement with increased aggression, their bodies pressing against the canvas in attempted pursuit. "Stay," my father commanded in a harsh whisper, restraining Rusty by the collar while my mother secured Scout. We remained frozen, straining to track the retreating footsteps as they diminished into the surrounding forest. Even after they faded beyond audibility, we maintained our vigilant silence, listening for any indication of return. Minutes passed with excruciating slowness. Eventually, my father activated his flashlight, illuminating our tense faces within the confined space. His expression revealed calculation rather than panic, the strategic assessment of a military man evaluating tactical options. "Everyone okay?" he whispered, receiving nervous nods in response. "What was that?" Joanna's voice trembled, barely audible. "Someone checking out our camp," my father responded, his deliberate calmness clearly intended to minimize our fear. "But they're gone now." "For how long?" Patrick challenged, voicing the question dominating my thoughts. My father's hesitation provided the answer his words wouldn't. "We're not waiting to find out. Pack up." Quickly and quietly. My father's instructions emerged as calm directives despite the circumstances. He functioned with military efficiency, assigning tasks while simultaneously retrieving his own belongings. "Patrick, help your brother. Catherine, get Joanna's things together. I'll check outside first." This last statement produced immediate protest from my mother. "James, you can't go out there," she hissed, grabbing his arm. "Just to the immediate area," he clarified. "I need to make sure they've truly gone before we start loading the car." The logic proved irrefutable, though it did nothing to diminish our collective anxiety. My father unzipped the tent flap with agonizing slowness to minimize noise. The dogs immediately attempted to exit, requiring Patrick's intervention to restrain them. My father disappeared into the darkness with only his flashlight, the beam sweeping methodically across our campsite. Those moments of separation stretched interminably. I pressed against my mother, drawing comfort from her proximity while imagining horrific scenarios unfolding beyond our canvas walls. When my father's face reappeared at the entrance, collective relief permeated the tent. "Perimeter's clear," he reported. "But they've been through our supplies. Coolers open, some food's missing. They tried the car but couldn't get in." This confirmation of tampering escalated our urgency. We emerged from the tent in careful sequence, each carrying personal belongings. The night air felt unnaturally cold against my skin, or perhaps adrenaline amplified my sensitivity. Moonlight illuminated the clearing with ghostly blue-white light, transforming familiar objects into unfamiliar silhouettes. "Keep close," my father instructed. "No one wanders off." We worked with unprecedented efficiency, dismantling our temporary home through choreographed cooperation. My mother supervised Patrick and me as we collapsed the tent, struggling with unfamiliar mechanisms, while my father secured our scattered supplies. Joanna maintained a death grip on both dogs' leashes, positioned at the center of our activity where everyone could monitor her safety. The disassembly lacked our usual methodical organization. Sleeping bags were stuffed rather than rolled, tent poles haphazardly collected, cooking equipment jumbled together without cleaning. My father's wilderness ethics temporarily suspended in favor of expedient departure. Throughout this process, we maintained hypervigilance, each unexpected forest sound triggering momentary paralysis. The crack of a distant branch breaking produced synchronized head turns and held breath. Even the creek's constant burble occasionally sounded threatening, its natural rhythm suddenly seeming to contain footsteps or voices. Our visitor's identity remained unknown, though theories formed in my young mind. Perhaps a desperate hiker seeking supplies, or teenagers from nearby communities looking for easy theft targets. More disturbing possibilities lingered at the edges of my thoughts. Individuals with predatory intent beyond mere property crime. Loading the station wagon presented unique challenges. Our original careful packing had maximized available space, a configuration impossible to replicate in hasty retreat. Items were wedged wherever they fit, creating precarious arrangements that would undoubtedly shift during our canyon descent. "We're leaving some things behind," my father announced after surveying our remaining equipment and the vehicle's capacity. "Non-essentials only." This practical decision still felt like defeat. Abandoned items included our campfire grill, several folding chairs, and miscellaneous cooking utensils. Each represented financial investment and future inconvenience, but no object warranted extended exposure to potential danger. The car's interior quickly transformed into cramped quarters. Joanna sat on my mother's lap in the front passenger seat, despite seatbelt regulations, while Patrick and I compressed ourselves among duffel bags and sleeping bags in the back. The dogs occupied the rear cargo area, still alert and occasionally growling toward the darkened forest. My father performed a final sweep of the campsite, flashlight illuminating our hasty departure's evidence. He returned to the vehicle, expression grim. "We're missing more than I initially thought," he reported, starting the engine. "Flashlights, some food, Patrick's backpack." "My knife collection was in there," Patrick lamented, his typical teenage bravado temporarily suspended by genuine distress. The station wagon's headlights carved twin tunnels through absolute darkness as we oriented toward the access road. Our usual departure procedure included multiple equipment checks and careful route planning. This exit featured none of these precautions, simply immediate necessary flight. The dashboard clock displayed 1:17 a.m. as we began our descent. Under normal circumstances, navigating Farmington Canyon's treacherous road during daylight hours demanded complete concentration. Attempting the same journey in darkness multiplied the challenge exponentially. My father drove with uncharacteristic intensity, hands gripping the steering wheel at precise positions. His focus remained entirely on the narrow dirt track illuminated by our headlights, the drop-off beside us occasionally visible as a void of absolute blackness. "Everyone keep your eyes open," he instructed. "Watch for movement in the trees." This request seemed unnecessary. None of us could have closed our eyes had we wanted to. Every sense remained heightened to uncomfortable awareness, my vision straining to penetrate darkness beyond our headlights' reach. The forest pressed close against the roadway, branches occasionally scraping against the vehicle's sides like skeletal fingers testing our defenses. Approximately 10 minutes into our descent, headlights appeared behind us, distant at first, but steadily gaining ground. The unexpected presence of another vehicle at this hour immediately raised alarm throughout our car. "Is that them?" my mother asked, voice tight with renewed fear. "Could be campers from another site," my father responded, though his skepticism suggested otherwise. "Maybe college students heading back early." The approaching vehicle maintained consistent distance, neither overtaking nor falling behind. Its presence created a new focus for our collective anxiety, the possibility that our campsite visitor had vehicular transportation and potentially malicious intent beyond opportunistic theft. When the road widened slightly at a switchback, my father pulled partially aside, allowing the following vehicle opportunity to pass if desired. It slowed, but maintained position behind us, headlights illuminating our car's interior through the rear window. The dogs responded with renewed barking, sensing our unease. "I can't see who's driving," Patrick reported, twisting in his seat for better visibility. "Too much glare from their lights." After an excruciating moment, the vehicle accelerated, pulling alongside rather than behind us. The narrow road barely accommodated two vehicles abreast, our passenger side wheels uncomfortably close to the precipitous edge. Through tinted windows, I glimpsed multiple occupants, at least 3 figures visible as silhouettes against their dashboard lights. For one terrible moment, I imagined forced confrontation, our family stranded if they blocked the road ahead. Instead, the vehicle accelerated past us, continuing downward at unsafe speed, dust billowing in their wake. "College kids," my father pronounced with obvious relief, though tension remained in his posture. "Probably up drinking," and decided to head back. Whether this assessment was accurate or intended to reassure us remained unclear. Regardless, the encounter added another layer to our already traumatic night. The reminder that unknown others shared these mountains with unpredictable intentions. Our descent continued with excruciating slowness. Each bend required careful navigation, the headlights revealing limited sections of road ahead. Occasionally, wildlife appeared at the periphery, deer eyes reflecting light before disappearing into undergrowth. A fox crossing hurriedly before our approach. By 2:30 a.m., we reached the canyon base, transitioning from dirt track to paved road with palpable relief. The increased traction and reduced danger from falling rocks produced noticeable relaxation throughout the vehicle. Civilization's proximity, evidenced by occasional roadside homes and eventual streetlights, further diminished our immediate fear. "We made it," my mother stated unnecessarily, reaching back to squeeze my knee. Her touch conveyed multiple messages: reassurance, shared experience, and implicit acknowledgement that something genuinely threatening had occurred. The remainder of our journey passed in comparative comfort, though adrenaline's recession left profound exhaustion in its wake. Even the dogs settled into uneasy sleep, their earlier vigilance depleted. By the time we reached our suburban neighborhood, artificial normalcy had begun asserting itself. Streetlights, familiar landmarks, and the rhythm of civilization creating distance from our wilderness experience. Pulling into our driveway produced disproportionate relief. Home represented safety, walls and locks, and neighbors within shouting distance. We unloaded minimal essentials, sleeping bags and overnight bags containing toiletries, leaving the bulk of camping equipment for morning retrieval. Inside, familiar surroundings offered immediate comfort. Nevertheless, my father checked each window and door lock twice before allowing us to disperse to bedrooms. The routine security measures now carried heightened significance. protection against threats that had transitioned from abstract to concrete during our abbreviated camping trip. Despite exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Whenever I approached unconsciousness, remembered sounds intruded. Footsteps circling our tent, Rusty's deep growl, branches breaking under unknown weight. My bedroom's familiar dimensions suddenly seemed insufficient barrier against the darkness beyond. Dawn arrived with muted relief, grey light filtering through curtains to dispel night's most immediate fears. Yet something fundamental had changed. An innocence diminished, replaced by unwelcome knowledge about vulnerability and the darkness that potentially resided in others. Morning brought physical discomfort alongside psychological after-effects. Muscles protested from tension maintained throughout the night, my jaw particularly sore from unconscious clenching. Nevertheless, daylight restored a semblance of normalcy as our family gathered in the kitchen, moving through familiar breakfast routines with mechanical precision. "Did everyone eventually get some sleep?" my father inquired, measuring coffee grounds with military exactness. Non-committal responses followed, shrugs, partial nods, mumbled affirmations that convinced no one. Dark circles beneath eyes testified to collective insomnia, particularly pronounced in my mother's normally vibrant face. "We should discuss what happened," she suggested, placing toast on the table without her usual arrangement aesthetics. "Try to make sense of it." This invitation prompted immediate theories from Patrick, who had apparently spent his sleepless hours constructing elaborate scenarios. "I bet it was poachers," he proposed, spreading strawberry jam with unusual concentration. "They operate at night and wouldn't want witnesses." "Wrong season for most game hunting," my father countered, though without dismissive tone. "Besides, poachers typically avoid campsites. Thieves then," my mother contributed, "looking for equipment or valuables." This explanation aligned most closely with evidence, our missing items and the attempted car entry. Yet something about it failed to satisfy completely. Pure theft motivation would likely have resulted in more efficient acquisition of valuables rather than the prolonged examination of our campsite. "Why circle the tent repeatedly?" I asked, voicing the question that had troubled my attempts at sleep. "Why not just take stuff and leave?" The silence following my inquiry contained unspoken adult concerns, considerations deemed inappropriate for children's ears, despite our direct involvement in the experience. My father and mother exchanged meaningful glances, communicating without words. Sometimes people who live in isolated areas develop unusual behaviors, my father finally offered, selecting words with obvious care. Their social norms differ from ours. This explanation, deliberately vague, somehow increased rather than diminished my unease. It suggested our visitor might not have been a conventional criminal with comprehensible motivation, but something less predictable, an individual operating outside standard behavioral parameters. Joanna, silent until now, suddenly contributed her perspective with unsettling directness. "I think they wanted to hurt us." Her statement, delivered with childish certainty, crystallized fears we had collectively avoided articulating. The possibility that our nighttime visitor harbored violent intent, rather than merely acquisitive motivation, transformed an unsettling experience into something potentially traumatic. "We don't know that," my mother interjected quickly, reaching to stroke Joanna's hair. "And we're all safe now." "More likely they were checking if we were awake before taking our stuff," my father added with forced pragmatism. "The dogs alerted them to our wakefulness." This rational explanation offered comforting structure, though I sensed adult embellishment designed for children's consumption. Nevertheless, I embraced the interpretation, preferring theft motivation to alternatives too disturbing to contemplate. After breakfast, my father and Patrick departed to retrieve our abandoned equipment, the daylight excursion, representing both practical necessity and symbolic reclamation. Their return several hours later brought unexpected information that reignited speculation. The campsite was completely cleared, my father reported, unloading the remaining tent components from the car. Nothing left behind. This development proved surprising given our hasty departure. We had reconciled ourselves to permanent loss of multiple items. Someone folded the chairs and stacked them neatly, Patrick added, his expression betraying confusion. Even the cooking grate was cleaned and packed in its original bag. Did you see anyone else up there? My mother asked, her face revealing renewed concern. Not a soul, my father responded, though we found these under a rock near where the tent stood. He produced Patrick's missing collection of pocket knives, arranged precisely in their fabric case. Nothing appeared damaged or missing, merely relocated from backpack to exposed position atop a prominent boulder near our former tent location. This deliberate placement defied conventional explanation. Thieves don't return valuable items in organized condition. Opportunistic campers discovering abandoned equipment might appropriate it for personal use, but wouldn't arrange it for original owner's retrieval. The careful presentation suggested intention beyond random criminality, a message encoded in objects rather than words. Maybe forest rangers? My mother proposed weakly, though we all recognized the improbability. Park officials would have left documentation or contacted authorities regarding abandoned equipment. More likely, whoever was circling found Patrick's name inside his backpack and felt guilty about taking a kid's stuff, my father suggested, his voice conveying uncertainty despite the reasonable hypothesis. The alternative remained unspoken. Our nighttime visitor had returned after our departure, meticulously organized our belongings, and placed Patrick's knives where they would certainly be discovered if we returned. The implication that they expected or hoped for our return contained disturbing possibilities none of us wished to verbalize. Throughout that weekend, our family maintained superficial normalcy while processing the experience through individual filters. My father increased household security measures, installing additional window locks and an alarm system keypad with uncharacteristic urgency. My mother kept the children unusually close, suggesting indoor activities despite perfect autumn weather. Patrick researched local news reports for similar incidents, finding nothing that matched our experience. Joanna expressed her processing through artwork, dark crayon drawings featuring shadowy figures circling tent-like structures. My own response manifested as hypervigilance. Every unexpected sound, branches against windows, the house settling at night, neighborhood dogs barking, triggered immediate adrenaline response. Sleep came reluctantly and departed easily, leaving me perpetually exhausted, yet unable to relax sufficiently for proper rest. Sunday evening, as we prepared for school and work resumption, my father initiated a family discussion that addressed the experience directly rather than through sidelong references. What happened Friday night was frightening, he acknowledged, gathering us in the living room, and it's natural to remain unsettled. Afterward, this validation of our ongoing discomfort provided surprising relief. Permission to experience appropriate reactions rather than pretending complete recovery. But we need perspective, he continued. No one was hurt. Property can be replaced. And we learned valuable lessons about situational awareness. His military background emerged in this framing, translating frightening experience into educational opportunity, extracting tactical value from potential trauma. While intellectually appropriate, the approach failed to address emotional components fully. My mother, recognizing this limitation, provided complementary perspective. It's also okay to be scared afterward, she added, her expression gentle. To need time before feeling comfortable camping again, or to have trouble sleeping. This dual approach, pragmatic acknowledgement paired with emotional validation, created space for individual processing while maintaining family cohesion. We weren't required to pretend fearlessness, but neither would we allow fear to dominate our future choices. "We'll go camping again," my father stated with certainty. "Perhaps not that particular site, at least not immediately. But we won't surrender wilderness experiences because of one unsettling encounter." This declaration established important parameters, acknowledging impact without granting it permanent victory. We would modify behaviors based on experience, but not abandon activities integral to family identity. As preparations for the coming week concluded, superficial normalcy gradually transitioned toward genuine stability. School and work obligations provided structured distraction, reducing opportunity for extensive rumination. Household routines resumed with increased appreciation for their predictable safety. Nevertheless, something fundamental had shifted in our collective consciousness, particularly for us children. The world contained newly recognized dangers beyond those adults had previously acknowledged, not merely natural hazards like weather or wildlife, but human unpredictability lurking at civilization's margins. I understood for the first time that isolation created vulnerability regardless of physical preparation. Our careful packing, my father's military expertise, even our vigilant dogs, had provided insufficient protection against nocturnal intrusion. Darkness contained threats beyond childhood imagination, and mountain beauty concealed potential danger alongside natural splendor. This knowledge represented premature introduction to adult awareness, the understanding that safety remains perpetually conditional rather than absolute. Our camping trip's abrupt conclusion marked transition from childhood's protected innocence toward more complex perception of reality's genuine parameters. The weeks following our abbreviated camping trip established new patterns within our household. Unspoken vigilance became standard procedure. Doors checked multiple times before bedtime, windows secured regardless of pleasant weather, exterior lights activated from dusk until dawn. My father installed motion-detecting floodlights that transformed our backyard into momentary daylight whenever neighborhood cats traversed our property. School provided welcome distraction during daylight hours, though concentration proved challenging. Assignments that previously held my complete attention now competed with intrusive memories and hypervigilance that continued despite rational understanding of our current safety. My teacher noticed subdued classroom participation, but attributed it to seasonal transition rather than specific incident. Sleep disturbances affected each family member differently. My father awakened instantly at minor household noises, conducting perimeter checks with flashlight in hand. My mother developed insomnia, often reading until early morning hours rather than attempting unsuccessful sleep. Patrick's response manifested as extensive research into wilderness safety protocols and defensive camping arrangements. Joanna simply crawled into our parents' bed most nights, seeking physical proximity as security against remembered fear. My own sleep patterns fragmented into brief periods of unconsciousness, interrupted by sudden wakefulness. Dreams incorporated elements from our experience, footsteps circling not tents but our suburban home, dogs growling at presences visible only to them, darkness containing watching entities just beyond perception's edge. I frequently awoke perspiring despite cool autumn temperatures, heart racing from threats encountered in unconsciousness. Approximately 3 weeks after the incident, an unexpected development disrupted our gradual progression toward normalcy. My father returned from work with uncharacteristic tension, evident in his posture and expression. "The security office at base received an interesting report today," he announced during dinner, setting down his fork with deliberate care. "Apparently there's been concern about someone living in the canyon forests." This statement immediately captured complete attention. Conversations about school and work instantly forgotten. Forest rangers found evidence of long-term occupation in a cave system about 2 miles from where we camped, he continued, selecting words carefully while monitoring our reactions. "Multiple sites, actually, with signs of habitation dating back several years." "What kind of evidence?" My mother asked, her voice maintaining deliberate calm for the children's benefit. Supplies arranged in caches, improvised shelters, some items clearly taken from campsites over time, sleeping bags, cooking equipment, clothing. The implications settled heavily across the table. Our nighttime visitor potentially represented not random criminal activity, but something more structured, an individual who had established territory that our campsite inadvertently violated. They're calling him the Canyon Watchman, unofficially, my father added, his expression revealing discomfort with such romanticized terminology. Apparently, there have been similar reports over several years, though nothing officially documented until now. Did they catch him? Patrick asked, leaning forward with intensity that combined fear and fascination. No. They found his shelters but no occupant. Rangers think he spotted their increased patrols and relocated deeper into the wilderness. This information created conflicting responses, confirmation that our experience represented genuine encounter rather than exaggerated interpretation, provided validation. However, the suggestion that our visitor maintained ongoing presence in familiar recreation areas generated fresh concern about future wilderness activities. They think it's just one person? My mother questioned, her expression suggesting deeper worries about potential danger. Evidence points that way, my father replied. Single set of footprints at most locations. Food supplies appropriate for individual consumption. Nothing indicating group activity. Is he dangerous? Joanna asked directly, her young voice conveying the question dominating all our thoughts. My father paused noticeably before responding. There's no evidence of violence at any of the sites. Mostly just observation. They found several makeshift platforms in trees overlooking popular camping areas. Apparently, he watches families camp. The statement's clinical delivery failed to diminish its disturbing implications. Our visitor likely hadn't encountered us randomly, but had observed our arrival, setup, evening activities, and eventual sleep before approaching. The prolonged footsteps circling our tent represented not confusion, but deliberate examination, assessment of a known target, rather than accidental discovery. Why would someone do that? I asked, genuine confusion underlying my question. The behavior pattern described seemed inexplicable, neither conventionally criminal nor merely eccentric, but something operating according to unknown motivation. Hard to say without speaking to him, my father responded with careful neutrality. Some people disconnect from society for various reasons. They develop different perspectives on appropriate behavior. This explanation, while factually accurate, contained deliberate omissions, adult knowledge filtered for children's consumption. Nevertheless, it provided sufficient framework for processing the information without intensifying existing anxiety. The Canyon Watchman revelation produced renewed community interest in wilderness security. Local newspapers published articles detailing ranger discoveries, including photographs of abandoned shelters and supply caches. Farmington Canyon temporarily closed to recreational use, while authorities conducted thorough searches of adjacent wilderness areas. Our family's experience, previously confined to personal narrative, suddenly acquired broader context within community discourse. Neighbors inquired about details, friends expressed retroactive concern, and my father received multiple interview requests from local media outlets. All politely declined. This external validation provided unexpected therapeutic benefit. What had existed as isolated, potentially exaggerated experience transformed into documented phenomenon with official recognition. The transition from questionable personal perception to confirmed reality somehow diminished rather than intensified psychological impact. By mid-November, public interest inevitably diminished as newer concerns captured community attention. Rangers reopened recreational areas with increased patrol schedules, and canyon visitors gradually returned to normal activities. Our family, however, selected alternative locations for outdoor excursions, prioritizing popular, well-trafficked areas over isolated settings regardless of their natural beauty. The incident's most enduring impact manifested in altered perception rather than specific behavioral changes. Wilderness retained its appeal, but acquired complexity beyond previous appreciation. Natural beauty remained evident, but now coexisted with awareness of human unpredictability, potentially concealed within scenic landscapes. For me particularly, the experience created lasting association between isolation and vulnerability. Dense forests that previously represented adventure now contained equal parts attraction and apprehension. Nighttime sounds acquired new significance, each unidentified noise potentially indicating human presence rather than natural processes. As winter approached and snow gradually transformed the mountainsides into gleaming white slopes, physical evidence of our encounter disappeared beneath seasonal accumulation. The canyon watchman, whether relocated or merely hibernating until spring, receded from immediate concern into occasional reminiscence. Nevertheless, subtle changes remained permanent, increased attention to surroundings, modified recreation choices, and most significantly, altered understanding of wilderness itself. The mountains had revealed additional dimension beyond geological features and natural beauty, the potential for hidden human presence, operating according to unknown parameters. This knowledge represented involuntary maturation rather than trauma, though elements of both coexisted in our processing. We had encountered genuine fear and emerged fundamentally unharmed, yet permanently changed. Our worldview expanded to include previously unacknowledged realities. By Christmas, surface normalcy had largely returned to our household. The camping equipment, thoroughly cleaned and meticulously inventoried, occupied its usual garage storage location. Casual references to future wilderness excursions entered conversation without triggering visible discomfort. Even sleep patterns gradually normalized, interrupted by only occasional nightmares or hypervigilant awakenings. Yet invisible boundaries had been established, unspoken parameters regarding acceptable risk and appropriate precaution. We would camp again, but differently, carrying extra awareness alongside traditional equipment. The wilderness remained beloved territory, but now contained acknowledged mystery beyond its natural characteristics, human elements operating outside conventional social structures. This balanced perspective represented neither surrender to fear nor dismissal of genuine concern, but integration of experience into revised understanding. We had encountered darkness containing more than absence of light. It potentially contained watching presence, assessment without introduction, observation without explanation. This knowledge, once acquired, could never be unlearned. It remained permanent accompaniment to future wilderness experiences, neither dominating nor forgotten, but incorporated into more complex appreciation of natural environments and their unseen inhabitants. 30 years have passed since that autumn night in Farmington Canyon. My parents have retired to a southern Utah community surrounded by different mountains with their own mysteries. Patrick works as a wildlife biologist in the Pacific Northwest, his childhood fascination with nature translated into professional expertise. Joanna teaches elementary school in Colorado, her artistic tendencies now directed toward inspiring creativity in young students. I remained closest to our Utah origins, working as a park ranger in the very wilderness that once frightened me so profoundly. This career choice surprised no one more than myself, representing either ironic resolution or psychological compensation for childhood trauma. Depending on therapeutic interpretation, the Canyon Watchman entered local folklore during the decades following our encounter. Occasional sightings continued throughout the late 1990s, gradually diminishing after millennium transition. Whether this represented successful relocation or more permanent departure remains undocumented. Rangers occasionally discover abandoned shelters in remote locations, though determining their origin proves impossible without direct contact. My professional responsibilities frequently position me in isolated wilderness settings similar to that fateful campsite. Modern equipment provides communication capabilities unavailable during childhood. Satellite phones, GPS tracking, emergency beacons, technological responses to timeless vulnerability. Nevertheless, certain situations still trigger momentary flashbacks, unexpected footsteps outside ranger cabins, solitary hikers approaching observation posts without prior notification, even innocent campers exploring beyond designated areas. Over years of wilderness service, I've encountered various individuals choosing isolation over society, military veterans processing combat experiences, environmental activists protesting development, individuals experiencing mental health challenges, finding nature more accommodating than human institutions. These encounters provided contextual understanding unavailable to my childhood self, illuminating potential motivations beyond simplistic criminal classification. Recently, while supervising trail maintenance in a particularly remote canyon sector, I discovered something both disturbing and illuminating. Beneath an overhang cleverly concealed by natural vegetation, a small shelter contained journals dating from the early 1990s through 2001. The handwriting, initially organized but deteriorating toward final entries, documented sustained wilderness habitation by a single individual. These writings detailed progressive disconnection from conventional society following financial collapse and family disintegration. The author, identified only as Observer, initially sought temporary wilderness refuge before developing alternative perspective regarding human behavior patterns. His journals recorded campsite observations spanning multiple years, including detailed assessments of various family interactions exhibited during recreational activities. Most entries maintained clinical distance, analyzing rather than engaging with subjects under observation. Occasionally, however, entries revealed interventions, equipment repairs completed while campers slept, supplies repositioned to improve functionality, even theft prevention through intimidation of potential criminals targeting vulnerable sites. Among hundreds of documented observations, I discovered entry dated October 1994 describing family matching our composition, parents, 2 boys, younger girl and 2 dogs in vintage olive canvas tent. The observer noted our efficient setup, appropriate fire management, and genuine familial connection unusual among temporary visitors. His subsequent entry detailed nighttime approach, initially intended as typical observation before discovering our awareness through canine alertness. The narrative described retreat following dog vocalization, followed by return after our hasty departure to organize abandoned equipment, preventing animal damage or exposure deterioration. The final paragraph contained unexpected perspective. The military father understood, saw recognition in his assessment immediately upon return. Territorial respect, the foundational wilderness principle most recreational visitors never comprehend, left the boys' collection where certainly discovered. Important lessons require meaningful illustrations. Reading these words produced complex, emotional response, validation of childhood, perceptions alongside disturbing confirmation that our experience represented deliberate educational intention rather than random encounter. The Canyon Watchman had selected our family for demonstration, using fear as instructional methodology for reasons comprehensible only within his isolated value system. I've never shared this discovery with my family members, though occasionally I've contemplated its potential impact on their long-term processing. Would confirmation of deliberate targeting increase lingering anxiety, or would contextual explanation provide resolution to unanswered questions? The journal's existence remains unofficial, documented in personal records rather than departmental reports. During family gatherings, conversation occasionally revisits that night, when prompted by camping references or childhood reminiscence. These discussions now feature more curiosity than apprehension, analytical distance replacing emotional immediacy. We debate motivations, consider alternative explanations, even acknowledge potential benefits from early exposure to wilderness complexity. It changed how I approach isolation, Patrick remarked during recent holiday reunion. Made me more prepared, more aware of surroundings. Probably saved me from genuine danger during remote research expeditions. Taught me that fear serves evolutionary purpose, my father added, his military pragmatism unchanged by retirement years. Being afraid when appropriate keeps you alive. My mother's perspective emphasized different dimension. It showed me that wilderness isn't just beautiful views and nice experiences. It's complex and sometimes challenging, like everything valuable in life. For me, the experience created career trajectory focused on wilderness education, emphasizing genuine respect rather than superficial recreation. My ranger presentations highlight appropriate balance between appreciation and caution, advocating preparedness without promoting paranoia. Occasionally, when speaking with particularly receptive groups, I reference the Canyon Watchman as unnamed cautionary example of boundaries between wilderness engagement and potentially harmful disconnection. The experience remains fundamental reference point, separating childhood's protected perception from more complex adult understanding. That single night, comprising mere hours in decades-long lifespan, permanently altered my relationship with darkness, isolation, and human unpredictability. The footsteps circling our tent continue echoing through memory, attenuated by time, but never completely silenced. When I occasionally pass our former campsite during patrol rotations, I observe how completely nature has reclaimed any evidence of our presence or hasty departure. The clearing remains, perpetually renewed by seasonal cycles, indifferent to human narratives constructed around its geography. The creek continues its journey toward larger watersheds, carrying mountain minerals toward distant valleys with unchanging purpose. Sometimes during these visits, I imagine alternative developments, our family remaining unaware of nocturnal visitation, completing planned weekend activities without interruption, departing with exclusively positive memories. This parallel possibility exists only in imagination, overshadowed by actual experience that forever altered our perception of wilderness and its inhabitants. Yet I recognize this alteration as education rather than damage, expanded awareness rather than diminished appreciation. The mountains never promise safety, only authenticity, a covenant upheld through both beautiful vistas and frightening encounters. Their indifference toward human presence constitutes neither cruelty nor kindness, but fundamental characteristic defining wilderness itself. Even now, when darkness descends on remote campsites where professional responsibilities position me, I occasionally find myself listening for rhythmic footsteps circling protective barriers. The sound rarely materializes except in dream states or memory fragments, yet its potential existence remains acknowledged companion to wilderness experience. This awareness represents neither paranoia nor trauma, resolution but integrated understanding, recognition that natural environments contain multiple realities simultaneously present, yet differently perceived. The Canyon Watchman emerged from wilderness depths, carrying perspective incomprehensible within conventional frameworks, reflecting mountain shadows existing independent of illumination, yet equally fundamental to landscape composition. As autumn colors again transform mountainsides into brilliant displays, attracting recreational visitors, I observe families establishing temporary residences in designated campsites. Their excited children explore perimeters, while parents construct contemporary shelters equipped with technological comforts unavailable during my childhood. Watching their innocent enjoyment, I occasionally wonder whether unseen observers still monitor from concealed positions. evaluating interaction patterns according to wilderness values developed in isolation. The possibility seems simultaneously disturbing and somehow appropriate. The mountains maintaining mysterious dimension beyond recreational categorization. If such observation occurs, I hope it remains distant assessment rather than direct intervention. Yet part of me acknowledges educational value in occasional boundary illustration, controlled exposure to wilderness complexity beyond scenic appreciation. Perhaps certain fundamental understandings require emotional impact beyond intellectual presentation, meaningful lessons illustrated through experiences that permanently alter perception. The rhythmic sound of footsteps circling protective barriers in darkness contains educational dimensions impossible to convey through conventional instruction. Some wilderness lessons can only be properly learned through direct experience. Regardless of resulting discomfort or temporary fear, I continue monitoring mountain pathways in professional capacity, maintaining appropriate boundaries between wilderness and recreation, natural processes and human intervention. Each season brings new visitors, seeking connection with environments increasingly absent from modern existence. I facilitate these connections while maintaining awareness of their inherent complexity, the simultaneous presence of beauty and potential danger, splendor and shadow, illumination and darkness. When I hear boots crunching forest detritus during patrol rounds, I remember that single childhood night when wilderness revealed dimension beyond scenic backdrop, the potential for hidden presence operating according to unfamiliar parameters. The memory no longer triggers panic, but serves as reminder of mountain authenticity beyond cultivated presentation. The footsteps circle eternally in memory, their rhythmic progression marking transition between childhood's protected perception and adult's complex understanding. I listen for their approach not with fear but recognition, awareness that wilderness contains mystery alongside beauty, darkness alongside illumination, and occasionally, watching eyes evaluating our worthiness from beyond firelight's comforting perimeter. I'd been itching to get away for a while, between work, bills, and just life in general kicking me around. A weekend in the woods sounded like the perfect reset. Just me, my brother Drew, and our friend Vincent. No phones, no emails, no noise. Just trees, fire, and stars. We settled on a spot out in New Mexico, not the touristy parts. This was deeper, far from cell towers, near the reservation line, but not quite on it. Drew knew the area from a hunting trip years back. He swore it was beautiful and quiet, and I didn't really care as long as it was far away from everything else. The drive took forever. Dirt roads that weren't really roads anymore. Just gravel, tire ruts, and dust for miles. We finally pulled up around 4 in the afternoon on Friday. It was hot, the kind of dry heat that soaks through your shirt but doesn't make you sweat. The silence struck me immediately. Not the peaceful quiet of nature, but something emptier. The area felt hollow, devoid of the usual forest sounds. Not even birds, just the soft whine of wind through dry trees and brush. I remember glancing at Vincent, who seemed to notice it too, his eyes scanning the tree line with slight unease. Some wildlife preserve, he joked, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. We set up camp fast, one big tent between the three of us, a little fire ring made of rocks and coolers stuffed with beer and junk food. Typical guy stuff. We weren't trying to survive off the land or anything, just trying to relax. That first evening, as the sun began to set, the terrain transformed. The shadows stretched like fingers across our campsite, reaching toward us with every passing minute. There was something about the landscape, jagged rock formations that looked almost human-like in silhouette. Trees twisted from years of harsh weather. I felt watched, though I tried to dismiss it as just being unfamiliar with the surroundings. "You feeling okay?" Drew asked, handing me a beer. "You keep looking over your shoulder." "Just making sure nothing's sneaking up on us," I laughed, but the sound felt forced even to my own ears. The first night was fine. We made burgers over the fire, drank a little too much, and sat up telling dumb stories from high school. It was calm. I remember thinking how good the stars looked out there, like you could fall into them if you stared too long. That first night I slept deeply, the exhaustion from the drive and setup overwhelming any lingering unease. I couldn't have known then what the coming days would bring. How quickly our simple camping trip would spiral into a nightmare that would haunt us long after we left those woods. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. We hiked a nearby trail, explored a dried-up riverbed, and collected firewood for the evening. It was almost noon when Vincent first noticed the markings on the trees. "Hey guys, check this out," he called. Standing before a large pine, Drew and I walked over to find strange symbols carved into the bark. Not fresh, the edges were weathered, the inner wood graying with age. They resembled arrows or directional markers, but warped somehow, pointing inward toward a central line. "Trail markers," I suggested. Drew shook his head. "Not like any I've seen before." We found more as we continued, always in sets of 3, always facing the direction we were headed. Vincent took photos, fascinated by what he assumed were Native American markings, or maybe signs from local hunters. I wasn't so sure. Something about their placement felt deliberate, like breadcrumbs leading us deeper. By late afternoon, we'd wandered farther than intended. The terrain became rougher, more isolated. Rock formations created natural corridors that funneled us along, and without discussion, we decided to head back to camp. The sun was beginning its descent, casting longer shadows through the trees. The forest seemed to compress around us, the spaces between trees narrowing. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Vincent asked suddenly, stopping to scan the tree line. I'd been feeling it all day, eyes tracking our movement from unseen vantage points. Drew laughed it off, but I noticed how he quickened his pace. We made it back to camp as dusk settled in. The temperature dropped rapidly once the sun disappeared, and we built the fire higher than necessary, creating a bubble of light that felt like protection. The second night started normally enough. We cooked hot dogs, drank beers, shared stories, but something had shifted in the atmosphere. The darkness beyond our firelight seemed thicker, more attentive. I kept glancing toward the trees, certain I'd catch movement if I looked quickly enough. It started weird right after sundown. We were sitting around the fire, Drew throwing pine needles in just to watch them spark, when we heard something move out in the brush. Not an animal sound, not really. It sounded like shuffling, slow, methodical, like footsteps, but heavier somehow, like something dragging. We all froze. Drew grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the noise, but it didn't reach far. "Just caught the trees and made shadows dance." "Probably a deer," Vincent muttered. But he didn't sound convinced. I tried to shake it off too. Probably just the dark and a little beer messing with us. But the mood had shifted. It was like the woods had changed around us, heavier somehow, like they were watching. "Let's tell ghost stories," Drew suggested, trying to lighten the mood. But none of us really wanted to feed the growing unease. We turned in earlier that night, packing everything away carefully, making sure no food was left out to attract animals. Inside the tent we talked quietly, as if trying not to be overheard by whatever lurked in the darkness. "I read somewhere that mountain lions are coming back to this region," Vincent said, clearly trying to rationalize what we'd heard. "Yeah, could be," Drew agreed too quickly. "We should keep the fire going through the night." None of us wanted to be the one to step outside and tend it, though. So we let it die down, watching through the mesh window of the tent as our circle of safety shrank with the diminishing flames. Later that night, I woke up to a sound I still can't describe properly. Not fully. It was like breathing, but not human, raspy and broken, coming from just outside the tent, low and close. Like someone was crouched down right behind the fabric, just listening, just waiting. I didn't say anything at first. Just stayed still, eyes wide open in the dark, trying to convince myself it was nothing. I thought maybe Drew or Vincent had gotten up to take a piss, but when I turned slightly, I could see their shapes on the floor beside me. Both still, both asleep. The breathing went on for a full minute. Then zip! The sound of our tent zipper pulling down, slow as hell, tooth by tooth. I couldn't move. My body locked up completely. My mind screaming at me to grab the flashlight or yell anything. But I just lay there, eyes locked on the little entry flap. But it never opened. Eventually the breathing faded, and I heard it again, that dragging shuffle as it moved away from the tent, and disappeared into the brush. I didn't sleep after that, just laid there staring at the ceiling, counting every heartbeat until dawn finally arrived. In the morning, I didn't say anything right away. I figured I was just overtired, or maybe still a little buzzed from the night before. The forest looked benign in the morning light, just trees and rocks and scrubby underbrush. Normal, safe. I started the coffee while Drew and Vincent still slept, hoping the routine would settle my frayed nerves. When they emerged from the tent, I considered telling them about what I'd heard, but something held me back. What if they thought I was losing it? What if it really had been nothing? But then Vincent stepped outside and called for us in this weird voice, tight and sharp. "You guys need to see this." We came out and there it was. Footprints all around the tent. Dozens of them. Their feet wide and long and misshapen. Like someone with a limp had been pacing around the tent over and over again. Some were smeared. Drag marks. And in the dirt near the fire pit, something had been drawn. A symbol. Just a crude stick figure carved into the dust, with a long vertical body and weird antlers or horns curling off the top. The limbs were long and bent out like a spider. "Did you do that?" Drew asked Vincent, half laughing, but with his voice cracking a bit. Vincent shook his head. "I thought one of you did." No one said anything for a while. I could see both of them trying to process what we were seeing, to find some rational explanation that would allow us to continue our weekend without admitting we were terrified. "Maybe someone's messing with us," Drew suggested, scanning the tree line. "Maybe there are other campers." "We haven't seen anyone else since we got here," I reminded him. "Could be local kids," Vincent offered. "Playing pranks on the out-of-towners." We all nodded, clinging to this explanation even though none of us believed it. The footprints were too numerous, too deliberately placed. And that symbol, something about it made my stomach tighten whenever I looked at it. "Should we pack up?" I asked, finally voicing what we were all thinking. Drew, always the stubborn one, shook his head. "And go where?" "Drive all night back to the city." "No way. We're not letting some prankster ruin our weekend." Vincent nodded, though I could tell he was reluctant. "One more night. Then we'll head back in the morning." We packed up breakfast quick that morning and decided to spend the day away from camp. Maybe if we were gone, whoever was messing with us would get bored and move on. We hiked to a small canyon about 2 miles away, bringing lunch and plenty of water. The canyon was beautiful, red rock walls stretching up nearly 60 feet, ancient petroglyphs etched into some sections. We spent hours exploring, taking photos, trying to pretend everything was normal. But every time the wind picked up, bringing sounds from deeper in the canyon, we'd all freeze, listening intently. "So, about last night," I finally said, as we sat eating our sandwiches on a flat rock formation. "Did either of you hear anything? Around 3 in the morning?" They looked at each other, then at me. "You mean the zipper?" Vincent asked quietly. My heart stuttered. "You heard it too?" He nodded. "I thought it was one of you guys going out to pee." I was half asleep. Drew was staring at us now, his sandwich forgotten in his hand. I woke up to breathing. Right outside the tent. I figured it was an animal sniffing around. We sat in silence, the implications settling over us. Someone or something had been outside our tent last night watching us, maybe trying to get in. And now we knew it hadn't been a dream or my imagination. Should we call the rangers? Vincent suggested. "Report it?" Drew shook his head. "No cell service, remember? We'd have to drive back to that gas station we passed, and that's a good hour each way. We could just leave," I said again. "Pack up and go." But pride and daylight courage won out. We agreed to stay one more night, but with precautions. We'd take shifts staying awake. We'd keep the fire going all night, and we'd keep our knives and the hatchet close. As we hiked back to camp that afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Not just watched, but actively tracked. Every time I turned to look behind us, there was nothing there, just empty trail and silent trees. But the sensation persisted, growing stronger as we approached our campsite. The place was giving off bad vibes now. Something didn't feel right. The third night was the worst. We didn't drink that night. Didn't really talk much either. Just sat around the fire in silence, throwing in wood and trying not to jump at every creak or gust of wind. The tension was physical, like electricity in the air before a storm. I took the first watch, sitting with my back to the fire, facing the darkness. Drew and Vincent crawled into the tent around 11, but I doubt either of them slept much. Every sound from the forest seemed magnified. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling, the occasional distant howl of what might have been a coyote. Around midnight, the woods went completely silent. No insects, no wind, nothing, just absolute stillness that made my ears strain for any sound at all. Then I heard it. A soft rhythmic tapping from somewhere to my left, tap, 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 like someone gently knocking on a tree trunk, keeping time to music only they could hear. I shone my flashlight in that direction, but saw nothing, just trees and shadows. The tapping stopped immediately. I waited, heart hammering, for it to resume, but instead, a new sound emerged from the opposite direction. Whispering, so faint I could barely make it out, but unmistakably human-like. I woke Drew, unable to sit alone with the sounds any longer. He emerged from the tent, bleary-eyed, but immediately alert when he saw my face. "Someone's out there," I whispered. "I can hear them." We stood back to back, scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. The whispering had stopped, but the feeling of being observed intensified. Drew suddenly grabbed my arm, pointing into the trees. "There!" he hissed. Something moved. I saw it too, a flicker of movement about 30 yards out, a shadow separating from the darkness for just a moment before melting back in. "Hello?" Drew called out, voice steady despite everything. "We know you're there." "What do you want?" Nothing. Just that awful silence pressing in from all sides. It was past midnight when we heard it. A voice. At first, we thought it was someone yelling from far away. Just one word screamed into the trees. "Help!" We froze. Then it came again. But it wasn't farther away. It was closer. "Help, please!" But the voice, it was off, like someone trying to imitate a human. The cadence was wrong. It sounded like it was coming from a throat that wasn't used to speaking. Drew stood up, grabbed the flashlight, and aimed it toward the sound. That's when we saw it, a shape, just at the edge of the firelight. It looked like a man at first, tall, naked, hunched forward. But its limbs were too long, its arms dangled nearly to the ground. The skin was pale and patchy, like something half-rotted, and its head, it was tilted wrong, like it had no control over its own neck. It opened its mouth again. "Help! Help me!" it croaked. But now we could all hear it clearly. That wasn't a person's voice. It sounded like one, but it was warped, like it was pushing the words through a broken speaker. Drew dropped the flashlight. Vincent screamed as he emerged from the tent, and the thing, whatever it was, took one long step forward. We didn't think. We just ran, grabbed what we could, and bolted for the truck. Branches slapped our faces, thorns ripped at our clothes, but I didn't care. I just kept running. I don't even know how I got to the truck or found the keys, but somehow we did. Threw ourselves inside, slammed the doors, and I floored it. The headlights swept across the trees as we turned, and for just a moment, I caught a glimpse of it standing in the middle of our abandoned campsite. It was even taller than I'd thought, impossibly thin, with that same wrong angle to its head. It didn't chase us. It just watched, motionless, as we sped away. We didn't stop until we hit a gas station about an hour out. It was one of those run-down places with a flickering sign, and nobody inside except a tired-looking guy behind the counter. We must have looked crazy. 3 guys covered in dirt, sweat, and terror. The cashier didn't say anything at first, just stared. Finally, I told him, maybe stupidly, what happened. I didn't use the word skinwalker or anything. Just said there was someone or something out there in the woods that didn't seem human. That's when his face changed. He looked us over real slow and said, "You boys weren't camping near Black Hollow, were you?" We looked at each other. That's exactly where we'd been. He just nodded. "You're lucky." "Lucky?" Vincent asked, still shaking. The man leaned in, voice low. "Ain't supposed to be up there this time of year." "That's when they walk." He wouldn't say more. Just gave us this look like a warning and rang us up for water and snacks without another word. We stayed in a cheap motel that night. Didn't talk much, just lay in our separate beds, trying to pretend none of it happened. The drive home the next day was silent, each of us wrapped in our own thoughts, jumping whenever one of us shifted or cleared a throat. We made a pact, without really discussing it, to never mention what we'd seen, as if saying it aloud would make it more real, would cement it in our realities in a way we couldn't handle. I dropped Vincent off first. He lived in an apartment downtown, surrounded by people and noise and light, safe. Before he got out of the truck, he turned to me, eyes wide and serious. "Do you think it was real?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "What we saw?" I didn't know how to answer. "I don't know what it was," I finally said. "But we all saw it." He nodded, face grim. "Call me tomorrow, okay?" But something in his voice made me think he wouldn't pick up. Drew was next. He lived with his girlfriend in a little house in the suburbs. As he gathered his gear from the truck bed, he paused. "Hey," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Let's not tell anyone about this." "They wouldn't believe us anyway." I agreed, watching him walk up the path to his front door. He looked back once, a quick glance over his shoulder, before disappearing inside. I went home to my empty apartment, threw my gear in a corner, and took the longest, hottest shower of my life, as if I could wash away the memory of that thing at the edge of the firelight. The way its limbs didn't move right. That voice, like a puppet learning human words. But I figured it was over. We'd gotten away. We'd left whatever that was behind in the trees, buried in the dust of some cursed stretch of wilderness. But then things started happening. Little things at first. The kind of stuff you'd brush off if it weren't for what we'd seen. The first night I was home, my dog Rusty wouldn't stop barking at the backyard. Just stood there at the sliding glass door, ears back, growling at nothing, hackles up, didn't move from that spot for hours. I figured it was a raccoon or something. I didn't go out to check, just closed the blinds and turned the TV up louder than normal. The next night I found muddy footprints on the porch, bare feet, and I live alone. I tried to stay rational, told myself maybe it was a prank or some neighbor's kid messing around. Still, I locked all the doors, checked the windows twice before bed, then the tapping started. It was around 3 in the morning, maybe later. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, too wired to stay in bed. I woke up to this soft tap-tap-tap against the glass. Not loud, not urgent, just deliberate. I didn't move, just sat there, breathing shallow, listening. After a minute it stopped. I waited another 5, then 10. Nothing. Eventually I stood up and peeked through the blinds. The porch was empty, but the air felt heavy again. That same pressure I remembered from the woods, like something was near, just out of reach. I turned every light on in the house that night. Slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow like an idiot. Told myself it was just my nerves. Until Drew called the next day. He hadn't spoken to me or Vincent since the motel. I figured he needed space. But when he called, his voice was different, strained, dry, like he hadn't slept. "I think something followed me," he said. I didn't say anything, just let him talk. He told me he'd been hearing things around his property at night, whispering, scratching, found claw marks on the side of his shed. His dog had gone missing 2 days before. "And the worst part," he whispered, "I saw it. I looked out my bedroom window last night, and I saw it in the yard, standing there. Same thing from the woods, I swear to God." I didn't want to believe him, not really. But I did, because that night it was my turn. I was brushing my teeth, just getting ready for bed, when I heard a voice, faint from outside. "Help!" My stomach dropped. I walked to the window above the kitchen sink, and for a second, just a second, I saw a shadow move across the backyard. A tall, crooked silhouette, hunched and slow. Then it was gone. The lights flickered. My phone glitched, just went black for a minute, then came back on. The next morning, I found the back gate open. I always lock it. Always. The grass looked trampled, flattened, like something had circled the house over and over again. I called Vincent. He didn't answer. I tried again an hour later. Still nothing. That night he finally messaged me. "Bro, are you seeing it too? Outside my window right now? It's just standing there." I called him, no answer. Just a text a few minutes later. It said my name. It said it in my voice. And then nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room with all the lights on. Front door dead-bolted. Shotgun across my lap. My fingers were trembling the whole time. The next morning, I drove to Vincent's place. His front door was locked, but his car was in the driveway. I knocked, rang the bell, pounded on the door. Nothing. I walked around to the back and looked through the window. That's when I saw the living room, completely torn apart. Couch cushions shredded, the coffee table split in half. Deep gouges in the floor like claws. Not dog claws, not anything normal. Deep uneven slashes like something had raked the ground in a frenzy. And in the center of the room, sitting upright in the corner, was Vincent's phone. Just sitting there, screen cracked, still on. I didn't go in. I called the cops. They took it seriously, I guess. Especially after seeing the state of the place. But Vincent was gone. No blood, no signs of a break-in, just gone. Like he'd been taken. They asked me questions. I lied through most of them. I wasn't about to start talking about monsters from the woods or voices mimicking your name in the dark. They listed him as missing. That was it. Drew and I didn't talk for a few days. Then he called again. Said he was leaving, moving, going to stay with his uncle in Montana, off-grid. "I can't be here anymore," he said. "I don't think we're safe." "I don't think anywhere's safe, but maybe if I'm far enough out, it won't find me again." I didn't argue. I understood, but I wasn't going to run. I wanted to know what it was. I wanted to understand why it was doing this, why it waited until we were home, safe, before it started tearing us apart. That night, I sat in front of my computer, the shotgun never far from reach, and started researching. If I couldn't outrun this thing, maybe I could understand it. Maybe knowledge would be protection enough. The internet was full of stories, some lurid and clearly fake, others chillingly similar to our experience. People camping in remote areas, strange figures at the edge of firelight, voices calling for help in the night, and afterward the stalking. The sense of being followed, being hunted, even in supposedly safe places. Most disturbing were the stories of what happened to those who were taken. They were never found. Not their bodies, not any trace, just gone with destruction left behind. Claw marks, chaos, and in many cases a symbol like the one we'd seen, that crude stick figure with long limbs and antlers. I printed out dozens of articles, taped them to my wall, connected them with red string like some conspiracy theorist. I wasn't sleeping much anymore. Every noise outside startled me. Every shadow seemed to contain movement. But I kept digging, desperate for anything that might help. That's when I found it, an old forum post from someone claiming to be a ranger in New Mexico. He wrote about territorial markers in the forests near certain tribal lands. Symbols carved into trees or drawn in dirt that served as warnings to stay away. And more importantly, he wrote about how to counter them. "If you see the Watcher's sign," he wrote, "do not run. It wants the chase. Instead, make your own mark. A circle with a line through it, drawn in your own blood. This is the sign of protection from the old ones. It cannot cross this barrier." It sounded crazy, desperate, but I was becoming desperate myself. I stared at that post for hours, wondering if there was any truth to it, any hope. The tapping at my window had become nightly now. Always at the same time, 3:12 a.m. exactly. Always in the same pattern. And sometimes, when I was brave enough to look, I would catch a glimpse of that tall, wrong-shaped silhouette watching from the yard. I stopped going to work, stopped answering calls, started boarding up windows and installing more locks. My neighbors probably thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. The lack of sleep, the constant fear, it was taking a toll. But I couldn't stop now. I had to understand. I had to find a way to end this. A week later, I started hearing scratching on my windows. It came every night at the same time, around 3:12 a.m., just this slow, deliberate scritch across the glass. I recorded it once, listened back the next day. It wasn't just scratching. There was whispering underneath, barely audible. My name, over and over, whispered in my own voice. That was the night I almost lost it. I packed a bag, threw it in the truck, and just started driving. Nowhere in particular, just away. But 2 hours out of town in the middle of nowhere, my truck died. Lights went out, engine sputtered, just died. I sat there on the side of the road, pitch black outside, and I swear to God I could see something in the trees, watching. I turned the key over and over, and it finally started again, roared back to life like nothing had happened. I didn't go home after that. I crashed at a friend's place out of state for a few days, slept on the couch, kept the lights on. Nothing happened while I was there. No tapping, no voices, just peace. But I couldn't stay forever. Eventually I came back, and now every night the lights flicker. Every night the porch camera glitches, and every night at exactly 3:12 a.m. the motion sensor by the back door lights up. But there's never anyone there when I check the footage later. I tried calling Drew again, wanting to know if he was experiencing the same things or if his escape to Montana had worked. The number was disconnected. I tried his girlfriend, but she just said he'd left weeks ago, hadn't heard from him since. He kept saying something was after him, she told me, voice tight with worry. I thought he was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe he was. Maybe we all were. I tried to check the online forums again for more information, but the post I'd found earlier was gone, deleted. The entire forum shut down. It was like someone was systematically erasing any information that might help me. I started setting up cameras around my house, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was stalking me. Most nights, they'd malfunction right around 3 a.m., just static or blackness during the crucial time. But one night, one camera caught something. It was at the edge of my yard, partially hidden by trees. That same tall figure, but the footage showed more detail than I'd seen before. Its skin wasn't just pale. It was almost translucent in places, stretched too tight over a frame that seemed more like twisted branches than bones. The head remained at that unnatural angle, but now I could see why. The neck was too long, bent backward, as if broken and never healed. And its eyes, two black hollows that reflected no light at all. Not looking at the camera, but at my bedroom window, watching, waiting. I almost deleted the footage immediately. Some primal part of me screamed that having this image, this proof, was dangerous, that acknowledging the thing made it stronger. But I needed evidence, needed to know I wasn't crazy. I saved the video to a drive and took it to the police station the next day. Told them I thought someone was stalking me, that I feared for my life. The officer looked concerned at first, then confused as he watched the footage. "Sir, there's nothing here," he said, turning the screen toward me, where I'd seen the creature, clear as day. The screen now showed only empty trees and shifting shadows. The timestamp remained, but the figure was gone, erased somehow between my house and the station. The officer suggested I seek help, maybe talk to someone about anxiety and paranoia. He gave me a card for a mental health clinic. I took it nodding, pretending to agree, but I knew what I'd seen. Knew it wasn't just in my head. That night, things escalated. The tapping became pounding, violent impacts that made my windows rattle in their frames. The power cut out completely, plunging the house into darkness, broken only by my emergency flashlight. And for the first time, I heard it speak inside the house. "Help me," my own voice called from the hallway. "Please help." I barricaded myself in the bathroom, shotgun aimed at the door, heart threatening to explode from my chest. The voice moved through the house, room to room, getting closer each time. The doorknob to the bathroom rattled, turned slightly, then stopped. Silence fell, complete and absolute. I stayed there until morning, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. When sunlight finally crept under the door, I emerged to find my house in chaos. Furniture overturned, pictures smashed, walls gouged with those same claw marks I'd seen at Vincent's. And on every mirror in the house, drawn in what looked like ash, that symbol. The stick figure with antlers and long twisted limbs. I remembered what the forum post had said about countering the mark. It seemed insane, but I was beyond logic now. I took a knife, cut my palm, and drew a circle with a line through it on every mirror, every window, every entrance to the house. I repeated the process outside, drawing the symbol in the dirt around the perimeter of my property. Then I waited. Night fell. The clock ticked toward 3:12 a.m. I sat in the center of my living room, shotgun ready, bloodied hand throbbing, straining to hear any approach. Tav came and went. Nothing. No tapping. No voices. No power outages. For the first time in weeks, the night passed quietly. I began to hope. Had it worked? Had the symbols actually protected me? I allowed myself a few hours of fitful sleep, waking to sunlight streaming through the windows. The sense of relief lasted until my phone rang. It was Drew's girlfriend again, her voice broken by sobs. They found his truck, she managed. In Montana, empty, just empty. But there were claw marks all over the inside, and some kind of symbol drawn on the dashboard. My stomach dropped. So it hadn't stopped. It had just shifted focus, moved on to Drew, while I'd temporarily warded it off. "I'm so sorry," I said, not knowing what else to offer. "The police think it was an animal attack," she continued. "A bear or something. But there was no blood. None at all." "How could an animal attack leave no blood?" I had no answer for her. None that wouldn't sound completely insane. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen, staring at the symbols I'd drawn in my own blood the night before. They were working for now. But for how long? And at what cost? Had I just redirected this thing to Drew? Was I responsible for whatever had happened to him? I called the police station where Drew's case was being handled, pretending to be a concerned friend who had information. The detective was gruff, but listened as I asked about details. About whether there were any leads. "Look, I can't share much," he finally said. "But I will tell you, this isn't the first disappearance like this we've seen recently. Same pattern. Vehicle abandoned, no blood, those weird markings. Something strange is happening out there in those woods." I asked him how many cases, how far back they went. "At least 6 in the last year," he admitted. "All hikers or campers who ventured into restricted areas. All gone without a trace." So we weren't the first. And based on what had happened to Vincent and now apparently Drew, we wouldn't be the last. Something was in those woods, something that attached itself to people, followed them home, and eventually took them. And I was still on its list. The protective symbols had worked for one night. But as I inspected them in the daylight, I noticed they were already fading, the blood drying to a dull brown, flaking away in places. I would need to renew them, to keep cutting myself open night after night if I wanted to stay safe. Or I could do what I knew I had to do. Go back to those woods, find the source. And this, I don't talk to anyone about it anymore. I tried once. A friend at work. He gave me this look like I needed help, like I was unraveling. Maybe I am. Maybe it's just trauma, some part of my brain cracking from stress. But deep down, I know the truth. That thing from the woods, it's not just some cryptid or old story. It's real. And it wants something. Not to kill. Not at first. It wants you to see it. It wants to be known. To be feared. To be inside your life. Drew is still missing. No leads, no updates. Vincent too, gone without a trace. And me, every time I close my eyes, I hear that voice. Help, not from far away now. From inside the house. And I don't know what to do anymore. The protective symbols work, but each morning they need to be redrawn. Each morning another cut, another smear of blood. My hand is a mess of scars now, the pain constant. This isn't sustainable. I can't live like this forever, jumping at shadows, bleeding myself dry for temporary protection. So I've made a decision. Tomorrow I'm going back to Black Hollow, back to where it all started. I've spent weeks researching. Gathering any information I can find about the area, about similar disappearances, about rituals of protection that might be more permanent than my blood-drawn circles. An old Navajo text I found talks about confrontation, about facing these entities at their source, about reclaiming your own voice and name from them. It says they can only take those who run, those who allow fear to consume them. I don't know if it's true, but it's the only hope I have left. I've packed my truck with supplies, salt, white sage, cedar, iron nails, and other items mentioned in various protective rituals. I've written down everything I know, everything I've experienced in this journal. If I don't come back, at least there will be a record. A warning to others. Tonight is my last night at home. I sit by the window, watching the darkness gather outside. The protective symbols are still holding. No tapping, no whispers yet. But there's a pressure building, like the air before a storm. It knows I'm planning something. It can sense my intent. In the yard, just beyond the barrier of my blood-drawn circle, I can see it. Not hiding anymore, not lurking at the edges of vision. It stands fully visible, that impossible height, those wrong-angled limbs. Its head swivels slowly, black voids of eyes fixed on me through the glass, watching, waiting. For the first time, I don't look away. I stare back, meeting that empty gaze, and I understand something I hadn't before. It's not just hunting me. It's studying me, learning me, becoming me in some twisted way. The thought makes my stomach churn, but I hold its gaze. Tomorrow, I say aloud, knowing somehow it can hear me. This ends tomorrow. The creature tilts its head further, neck bending at an angle that would snap human vertebrae. A sound emerges from it, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. An acknowledgement, perhaps. A challenge accepted. Dawn breaks, and I load the final supplies into my truck. The neighborhood is quiet, oblivious to the horror that has been unfolding in their midst for weeks. I take one last look at my house, knowing I may never see it again. The protection symbols have held through the night, but they're fading fast, brown blood turning to dust. The drive to New Mexico feels different this time. No excitement, no anticipation of relaxation. Just grim determination and fear churning in my gut. The roads become familiar as I approach Black Hollow. The same gravel paths, the same twisted trees. It's exactly as I remember, yet somehow more sinister in daylight. I park at the trailhead, a quarter-mile from where we camped that weekend. The forest is silent around me, not even wind disturbing the leaves. Waiting, I gather my supplies, a backpack filled with protective items, a knife, a flashlight. The shotgun stays in the truck. I know somehow it would be useless against what I'm facing. The hike to our old campsite is eerie. The forest feels dense, compressed, like it's leaning in toward the path. I keep my eyes forward, refusing to look for movement in the periphery. The symbols we found carved in trees weeks ago seem more numerous now. Or perhaps I'm just noticing them more. They all point inward toward the center of the hollow. Our campsite is untouched. The fire ring still there, the flattened grass where our tent stood. And in the center, fresh in the dirt, that symbol. Larger now, more detailed. The stick figure with antlers and twisted limbs. It wasn't here when we fled. Something has drawn it recently, waiting for me. I set up my own circle, salt poured in a perfect ring, iron nails driven into the ground at cardinal points, sage burning in the center. I sit cross-legged inside this barrier and wait as the sun begins its descent. The text said I must confront it at dusk, the time between worlds when barriers are thinnest. Hours pass. The forest grows darker, shadows lengthening. I maintain my position, focusing on steady breathing, on keeping fear at bay. This entity feeds on terror. I believe that now. It grows stronger with each quickened heartbeat, each panicked thought. When dusk finally arrives, the transformation is immediate. The air thickens, becomes heavy in my lungs. Sounds emerge from all directions, whispering, scratching, that familiar tap, tap, tap on tree trunks. Movement flickers at the edges of my vision, but I keep my gaze fixed on the symbol in the dirt. I know you're here, I say, voice stronger than I feel. I've come to end this. The whispering intensifies, becoming a chorus of voices. Some I recognize. Vincent's laugh. Drew's sarcastic tone. My own voice calling for help. They circle around me, incorporeal yet pressing against my protective barrier, testing its strength. Then silence falls again. Complete, absolute, and it appears, stepping from between trees that seem to bend away from its passage. Taller than I remembered, its limbs longer, its body more twisted. The head still at that wrong angle, black void eyes fixed on me. It stops at the edge of my circle, head tilting as it examines my barrier. A sound emerges from it, that broken, raspy breathing I first heard outside our tent. "You came back," it says, using my voice perfectly now. No distortion, no mechanical quality. Just my voice, as if coming from my own mouth. "To finish this," I reply, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Finish?" it asks, circling my barrier slowly. "Nothing ends. It only changes, becomes something new." I follow its movement, turning to keep it in sight. "What are you?" A sound that might be laughter. "I am what walks between, what watches, what waits. What did you do to my friends?" It pauses, head tilting further. "They ran. You stayed. Where are they?" "Here," it says, gesturing to itself. "They're everywhere, part of the watching now." My blood runs cold at the implication that my friends aren't just gone. They've been absorbed somehow, become part of this entity. Their voices, their memories, parts of them still exist within it. "And that's what you want from me," I say. "Not a question. You are different," it replies. "You came back. Voluntary offerings are rarer, stronger. I'm not offering myself." That broken laughter again. "Yet here you are." The entity moves closer to my barrier, one elongated finger reaching out to touch the line of salt. It hisses, withdrawing slightly as the salt glows faintly on contact. "Protections," it says, almost amused. "They will not last." "They don't need to," I reply, reaching into my backpack. "I just need them long enough." I withdraw the final item from my pack, a small mirror, its surface inscribed with the counter symbol I'd been using at home. The circle with a line through it, drawn in my blood. The entity recoils slightly, those void eyes narrowing. Reflections can be problematic. "That's what I'm counting on," I say, raising the mirror toward it. "You've been taking from us our voices, our forms, our fear. Now I'm taking back." I begin reciting the words from the Navajo text, ancient phrases that feel strange on my tongue, but powerful nonetheless. As I speak, the mirror's surface begins to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. The entity shrieks, a sound that contains multitudes, dozens of voices crying out at once. It lunges toward my barrier, clawed hands striking against the invisible wall created by salt and iron. The mirror in my hands grows hot, painfully so, but I continue the chant, holding it steady, pointed at the creature. Its form begins to waver, like heat rising from asphalt, portions of it seeming to peel away, drawn toward the mirror's surface. I hear Vincent's voice, clear as day. "Keep going!" Then Drew's, "It's working!" The entity thrashes, its form stretching, distending, as pieces of it are pulled into the mirror. The void eyes fix on me one last time, and I hear my own voice emerge from it once more. This changes nothing. I am always watching. With a sound like air rushing from a vacuum, the entity collapses inward, drawn into the mirror in a spiral of darkness. The glass cracks but holds, a web of fractures spreading across its surface. Within the cracks, I can see movement, shadows shifting, faces forming briefly before dissolving again. Then stillness. The forest exhales around me, normal sounds returning. Insects chirping, leaves rustling. My protective circle remains intact, but the mirror in my hands feels heavy, alive with captured energy. I don't know if I've destroyed the entity or merely contained it. The texts weren't clear on that point. All I know is that the pressure is gone. That sense of being watched, being hunted, has lifted. Whether temporary or permanent, I've bought myself time. I carefully wrap the mirror in a cloth inscribed with protective symbols and place it back in my pack. The forest feels different now. Not friendly exactly, but neutral. No longer actively hostile. As I hike back to my truck, I think about Drew and Vincent. Are they truly gone? Or is some essence of them trapped within that mirror now, along with the entity that took them? The thought is both horrifying and strangely comforting. At least they're not suffering anymore. At least there's some form of closure. Back at the truck, I place the wrapped mirror in a box lined with salt and iron filings, then seal it with wax mixed with sage ash. I don't know what to do with it long term, Perhaps bury it somewhere remote, or find someone with more knowledge who can handle it safely. All I know is this: the thing from the woods, it's not just some cryptid or old story. It's real. And while I may have contained it for now, I don't believe for a second that it's gone completely. These entities don't die. They wait, they watch, they find new ways to reach through the barriers between their world and ours. So I remain vigilant. I check my doors twice before bed. I renew protective symbols regularly. And I never, ever answer when I hear a voice calling for help in the night. Because now I know I didn't bring it back. It followed. And somewhere, somehow, it's still watching. I should have trusted my instincts when we first turned onto that unmarked forest service road. The main campground had been bustling with activity. Families gathered around proper fire pits, RVs neatly parked in designated spots, the comfort of civilization just barely contained by the surrounding wilderness. But I had been determined to find somewhere more secluded, somewhere authentic, as I kept insisting to Jen and our friend Kimberly. Just a bit further, I promised, ignoring the concerned glances they exchanged as our sedan bounced over increasingly rough terrain. The ranger said there are dispersed camping spots down this way. What the ranger had actually said was that these remote sites were rarely used except by experienced backcountry campers, a category that, in retrospect, clearly excluded us with our department store tents and cooler full of craft beer. The sunlight faded rapidly as we ventured deeper, transforming the forest from a welcoming green sanctuary to a maze of grasping shadows and obscured paths. By the time we found a small clearing suitable for camping, darkness had fully descended. The headlights of our car carved out a meager circle of visibility, revealing a patch of flattened earth surrounded by unusually dense forest. The trees stood abnormally close together, creating what appeared to be a solid wall of vegetation just beyond our small clearing. "This doesn't look right," Jen said, her voice tight with apprehension as she surveyed the site. "Where are the fire rings, or any sign that people camp here?" "It's perfect," I insisted, though an uncomfortable sensation had begun forming in the pit of my stomach. "We wanted isolation, didn't we?" Kimberly remained silent, her attention fixed on the tree line. Later, she would tell me she thought she'd seen movement there, something tall, shifting between the trunks. At the time, she dismissed it as exhaustion from our long drive. We unloaded our gear in tense silence, the sounds of our movements unnaturally amplified in the still air. No distant laughter from other campers, no comforting murmur of a nearby stream, just the soft thud of equipment hitting the ground and our increasingly labored breathing. "Did anyone notice how quiet it got?" Kimberly finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, like completely quiet?" She was right. The normal forest ambiance, insects, rustling leaves, the occasional cry of a night bird, had vanished entirely. It was as if the wilderness itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I laughed nervously, the sound dying quickly in the oppressive stillness. "Probably just means rain tomorrow. Animals always know." But deep down, I recognized this peculiar silence for what it was, a warning. Nature was telling us something, and I had deliberately chosen not to listen. Setting up camp proved more difficult than anticipated. The ground beneath us felt wrong, hard in places where it should have been soft, yielding where it should have been firm. Each tent stake I drove into the earth produced a strange hollow sound, as though I were puncturing something just beneath the surface. "Everything okay?" Jen asked, noticing my hesitation. "Fine," I lied, forcing the final stake into position. "Just takes a bit more muscle out here than at those groomed campgrounds." Our two tents stood awkwardly in the clearing, their bright synthetic colors looking garish and out of place against the natural darkness. We gathered fallen branches for a fire, though I noticed every piece of wood we collected was unnaturally dry, almost brittle to the touch. The fire caught quickly, too quickly, sending up flames that seemed to reach higher than they should have. The light cast by our modest blaze didn't extend far. Instead of illuminating our surroundings, it merely created a small island of visibility surrounded by impenetrable darkness. As we huddled around the fire attempting to cook our dinner, I found myself repeatedly glancing over my shoulder. The sensation of being observed grew increasingly difficult to ignore. "You feel it too, don't you?" Kimberly murmured, following my gaze into the darkness. "Feel what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Like we're being watched. Like there's something—" She trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. Jen shifted uncomfortably beside me. "It's just the isolation playing tricks on us. We're not used to being this far from civilization." I nodded in agreement, though neither of us seemed convinced by her explanation. As we ate our hastily prepared meal, conversation was sparse and forced. We avoided discussing the peculiar atmosphere that had settled over our campsite, as if acknowledging it might somehow make things worse. Later, as the fire began to die down, Kimberly mentioned something about the local history she'd read while researching camping spots. "This whole area was logged pretty heavily in the 1930s, she said, her voice unnaturally loud in the silence. "They say a whole crew of loggers disappeared one winter. Never found a trace of them." "That's not helpful right now," Jen snapped, her nerves clearly frayed. "Just making conversation," Kimberly replied defensively. "Besides, it was almost a century ago." I stirred the embers with a stick, watching as sparks spiraled upward, only to be swallowed by the darkness. "Let's turn in. Everything will seem less intense. In the morning." We extinguished the fire with meticulous care, and I performed a final check of our surroundings before retreating to our tents. Nothing seemed obviously amiss, yet I couldn't shake the conviction that something fundamental had changed about the forest since our arrival. As Jen and I settled into our sleeping bags, I found myself straining to hear anything, any sound that might indicate the normal processes of nature continuing around us. But all I could detect was the sound of our own breathing and the occasional rustling as Kimberly shifted position in her tent nearby. "Do you think we should leave tomorrow?" Jen whispered, her hand finding mine in the darkness. "Let's see how we feel in the morning," I replied. Though in truth, I was already contemplating how early we could reasonably pack up and depart. Sleep came reluctantly, fragmentary and shallow. I drifted between consciousness and uneasy dreams, each time waking with the certainty that someone or something had called my name. I jolted awake sometime after midnight, my heart hammering against my ribs. For a moment, I couldn't identify what had disturbed my sleep, then I heard it again. A long, wavering cry that seemed to rise and fall in a distinctly unnatural pattern. It wasn't an animal sound I recognized, despite years of camping and hiking. This had a quality that made my skin tighten with instinctive fear. Beside me, Jen stirred. "What was that?" she whispered, her fingers digging into my arm. "I'm not sure," I admitted, listening intently as the sound faded. "Maybe a fox or a coyote. They can make weird noises sometimes." The explanation felt hollow even as I offered it. Whatever had produced that sound, it wasn't any wildlife I'd encountered before. The cry held an almost deliberate quality, as if it were trying to communicate something specific. We lay motionless, barely breathing, as we waited for it to repeat. Instead, an absolute silence descended, deeper and more complete than before. The forest seemed to be listening too, anticipating what might come next. Eventually, Jen's grip on my arm relaxed slightly. "Maybe it was farther away than it sounded," she suggested, though her voice remained tense. I nodded in the darkness, unwilling to contradict her. "Try to get some sleep. I'll stay awake for a while, just to be sure." As she settled back down, I strained my senses, searching for any hint of movement outside our tent. For several minutes, nothing disturbed the unnatural quiet. Then I detected it, a faint sound like careful footsteps on the gravel around our campsite. The steps had a measured quality to them, deliberate and patient. They seemed to circle our tent, maintaining a consistent distance. My mouth went dry. I considered calling out, thinking it might be Kimberly, unable to sleep and checking our surroundings. But something stopped me, an instinctive certainty that whoever or whatever was circling our tent was not our friend. The footsteps completed what seemed to be a full circuit of our campsite before gradually fading. I waited, counting my heartbeats for what felt like hours. When nothing further happened, exhaustion eventually overcame my vigilance, and I slipped into an uneasy sleep. I woke again to a strange illumination filtering through the tent fabric. My first thought was relief. Dawn had arrived. But a quick check of my phone showed it was only 3:17 a.m. The light outside had an unusual quality, not the blue-gray of early morning, but a sickly yellowish glow that seemed to pulse slightly. Careful not to wake Jen, I shifted to the tent entrance and peered through a small gap in the zipper. What I saw made no sense. The clearing was largely dark, yet there appeared to be points of dim illumination moving among the trees. They drifted slowly, like fireflies, but much larger and with that same unnatural yellow tint. As I watched, one of the lights separated from the others and began moving toward our tent. My breath caught in my throat as it approached, growing slightly brighter with proximity. It hovered about 10 feet from the tent, remaining stationary for several heartbeats before abruptly extinguishing itself. In its absence, I became aware of a silhouette where the light had been, a tall, indistinct figure standing motionless at the edge of our clearing. Though I could discern no details in the darkness, the shape was unmistakably person-like, yet somehow wrong in its proportions. I scrambled back from the tent opening, my heart racing. Beside me, Jen murmured in her sleep, troubled by dreams she would later describe as filled with watching eyes. I lay rigid, afraid that any movement might attract attention from whatever waited outside. Eventually, unable to maintain my terrified vigilance, I succumbed once more to exhaustion. My last conscious thought was a desperate prayer that morning would come quickly, bringing with it the rational light of day. I awoke to pressure on my feet, a distinct, deliberate weight pushing down through the sleeping bag. For a disoriented moment, I thought Jen had shifted position in her sleep. Then I realized two critical facts simultaneously. She was still beside me, and the pressure was coming from outside the tent. Something was pressing down on the tent fabric, exactly where my feet were positioned. Panic surged through me, galvanizing my body into action before my mind could fully process what was happening. I kicked violently and began shouting, the sound tearing from my throat in a primal expression of terror. "What? What is it?" Jen bolted upright, confusion and fear mingling in her voice. I continued thrashing, unable to articulate what I'd felt. The pressure had vanished the instant I began moving, but the memory of it remained. Deliberate, testing, curious. Not the random weight of a falling branch or an animal investigating our tent, but something purposeful. Something was pressing on the tent, I finally managed to gasp. Right on my feet, like someone was... "Are you sure?" Jen interrupted, her voice tight with controlled fear. "Maybe you were dreaming." I shook my head vehemently. It was real. I felt it. We fell silent, listening intently for any sound outside. Nothing disturbed the pre-dawn stillness. No footsteps retreating, no branches breaking, not even the rustle of disturbed underbrush. Whatever had been there had departed with impossible stealth. "We need to check on Kimberly," Jen whispered after several minutes had passed. The prospect of leaving our tent filled me with irrational dread, but I knew she was right. Gathering what courage I could muster, I unzipped the tent flap and cautiously extended my flashlight beam into the darkness. The clearing appeared unchanged. Our car, Kimberly's tent, the cold fire pit, all exactly as we had left them. No footprints marked the soft earth around our tent. No evidence remained of whatever had applied that deliberate pressure. We approached Kimberly's tent with trepidation, calling her name softly. After a moment of heart-stopping silence, the zipper opened and her frightened face appeared. "Did you hear that shouting?" she demanded. "What happened? You didn't come outside at all tonight?" I asked, ignoring her question. She shook her head emphatically. I haven't left my tent since we all turned in. What's going on? We exchanged glances, the implications settling over us like a physical weight. If Kimberly had remained in her tent all night, then the footsteps I'd heard, the pressure on our tent, these had come from someone or something else. We're leaving, I announced, my voice steadier than I felt. All right now. Pack up only what you need. We can come back for the rest in daylight. Neither of them argued. We moved with frantic efficiency, stuffing sleeping bags into stuffed sacks and gathering only essential belongings. The entire time I kept glancing toward the tree line, half expecting to see those drifting lights return, or worse, the vague human-like silhouette I'd glimpsed earlier. Within 20 minutes, we had thrown our hastily packed gear into the car and were ready to depart. As I started the engine, the headlights illuminated the campsite one final time. In that brief moment, I thought I saw something reflect the light at the forest's edge. 2 points of dull yellow gleam, like eyes watching our retreat. I reversed quickly, maneuvering the car back toward the forest road with more haste than caution. No one spoke until we had left the clearing far behind and rejoined the main campground road, where the reassuring sight of other tents and vehicles finally allowed us to exhale. What happened back there? Kimberly asked from the back seat, her voice small and strained. I don't know, I admitted, and I don't think I want to know. We drove to a 24-hour diner about 30 miles from the campsite, where we huddled in a booth nursing cups of coffee as we waited for dawn. The harsh fluorescent lighting and background chatter of other customers gradually helped restore a sense of normalcy. Though we all started at unexpected sounds. We should report this, Jen said finally, breaking our extended silence. What if someone else camps there? I nodded reluctantly. But report what, exactly? Strange noises? A feeling of being watched? They'll think we're just city folks spooked by normal forest sounds. What about the pressure on the tent? Kimberly asked. And those lights you saw? Those aren't normal. I had no answer. How could I explain phenomena that I barely understood myself? Even now, seated in the deliberately ordinary surroundings of the diner, my experience seemed increasingly implausible. Had I imagined the pressure on the tent? Had the strange lights been nothing more than fireflies or reflections from our flashlights? Maybe we could ask around, Jen suggested. See if anyone local knows anything about that area. Our waitress, an older woman with a weathered face and kind eyes, provided an unexpected opportunity when she came to refill our coffee. You folks look like you've had a rough night, she observed. Camping troubles? Hesitantly, I described our experience, omitting the more unsettling details and framing it as simple confusion about whether we'd camped in a proper spot. It was off Forest Service Road 22, about 7 miles in. Small clearing, very isolated. The change in her expression was subtle but unmistakable, a slight tightening around the eyes, a momentary pause in her movement. That's odd, she said, her casual tone sounding forced. Not many people camp out that way anymore. Is there a reason? Kimberly pressed. The waitress shrugged, but her discomfort was evident. Just stories, you know how it is in small towns. Supposedly, there was an incident out there years back. A hiker went missing. Search parties looked for weeks but never found anything. She busied herself wiping an already clean section of table. Probably just got lost and wandered out somewhere else. It happens, but people avoid the area because of it? I asked. People have their reasons for staying away from certain places, she replied cryptically. Sometimes it's just a feeling, you know, like you're not welcome. She excused herself to attend to other customers, leaving us to contemplate her words. We exchanged glances, each recognizing our own experience in her description. So it's not just us, Jen said quietly. I nodded, both relieved and disturbed by the confirmation. But it doesn't explain what happened. As daylight fully established itself outside the diner windows, we debated our next steps. The rational course would be to report our experience to the Forest Service office, retrieve our abandoned equipment in full daylight, and put the entire incident behind us. Yet something kept us lingering in that booth, reluctant to approach the forest again. even with the supposed safety of daylight. "What if we go to the local library?" Kimberly suggested. "Maybe there's something in old newspapers about that missing hiker, or other incidents in the area." The idea gave us purpose, a way to approach our experience through the filter of research and documented fact. We paid our bill, leaving the waitress a generous tip, and headed for the town's small library, which opened at 9 a.m. The librarian, a young man with an eager helpfulness that suggested visitors were uncommon, directed us to their archives of local newspapers and a small collection of books on regional history. We divided the materials among ourselves and began searching for any mention of Forest Service Road 22 or incidents in that area of the National Forest. After 2 hours of increasingly dusty investigation, patterns began to emerge. No single dramatic event explained the apparent aversion to our camping spot, but rather a steady accumulation of small incidents over decades. Hikers reporting disorientation, campers cutting trips short without explanation, a forest ranger requesting reassignment from that sector after only 2 months on the job. Most tellingly, I found a survey map from the 1950s that showed our clearing marked with a simple notation: site unsuitable for development, geological concerns. Yet no specific geological hazard was ever documented. "It's like the forest itself doesn't want people there," Kimberly observed, leafing through a thick binder of wildlife incident reports that contained no references to our area, an absence that seemed significant given the detailed documentation of animal encounters throughout the rest of the forest. "That's ridiculous," I replied automatically, though without conviction. Forests don't want things. Yet as we continued our research, I found it increasingly difficult to dismiss the idea entirely. What if certain places did somehow resist human presence, not through supernatural means, but through some confluence of natural factors, geological, biological, perhaps even psychological, that created an environment inherently hostile to human intrusion? As the morning wore on, we gradually assembled a disquieting picture. Our seemingly random choice of campsite had taken us to a location that local knowledge had quietly designated as a place to be avoided. Not dramatically, not with warning signs or official restrictions, but through the more subtle mechanism of communal memory and shared experience. By early afternoon, we faced a practical decision: return to the campsite to retrieve our abandoned equipment or write it off as an expensive lesson. The rational part of me insisted that in daylight, with full awareness, the place would reveal itself as nothing more than an ordinary clearing in the woods. Whatever had frightened us had been amplified by darkness and isolation. "I'll go back," I announced finally. "You two can wait in town." Both Jen and Kimberly immediately objected. "If anyone goes, we all go," Jen insisted, though her expression revealed her reluctance. We drove back toward the forest in tense silence. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the road as we turned onto Forest Service Road 22, its unpaved surface seeming more rugged than I remembered. Each mile increased my certainty that returning was a mistake, yet I continued driving, propelled by a mix of practical necessity and stubborn curiosity. When we reached the turnoff to our campsite, I stopped the car. Last chance to change our minds. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Kimberly leaned forward from the back seat. "I want to understand what happened. Don't you?" Her question crystallized something I had been avoiding acknowledging. Beneath my fear lay a powerful need to make sense of our experience, to place it within some framework that would allow me to file it away as explained. I nodded and continued driving. The final approach to our clearing seemed longer than it had the previous evening, the forest on either side more dense and impenetrable. When we finally emerged into the open space where we had camped, I was struck by how ordinary it appeared in daylight, just a small, somewhat overgrown clearing that showed signs of infrequent use. Our abandoned tents stood exactly as we had left them, slightly collapsed from our hasty departure, but otherwise undisturbed. No mysterious footprints marked the ground. No unexplained lights drifted among the trees. The entire scene projected such mundane normalcy that I began to doubt my own memories of the night before. We exited the car cautiously, each of us surveying the area with wary attention. Birds called from the surrounding forest. Insects buzzed in the underbrush. All the natural sounds that had been so conspicuously absent during our stay. "It feels different," Jen observed, her posture gradually relaxing. I nodded in agreement. Maybe we just worked ourselves up last night. Porous psychosis or something. We began dismantling our campsite, working quickly, despite the apparent absence of threat. No one suggested lingering or exploring the surrounding woods. We wanted our belongings and then departure, in that order. As I was collapsing my tent, I noticed something odd about the ground beneath it, a series of small, perfectly circular depressions arranged in a pattern that resembled footprints, but not of any animal or human I recognized. They led from the forest edge directly to where my feet had been positioned in the tent. I called the others over to examine the marks. "Those weren't there yesterday," Kimberly stated with absolute certainty. "I would have noticed when we set up the tents." I knelt to examine one of the depressions more closely. It penetrated about 2 inches into the soil, its edges remarkably crisp, as if something had been inserted and removed with surgical precision. I probed one with a stick, finding the bottom oddly compacted. "Maybe it's just some kind of fungus," I suggested, not believing it myself. "Or animal burrows?" Jen shook her head slowly. "Animals don't dig in perfect circles, or in straight lines." As we contemplated the inexplicable markings, the forest around us gradually grew quiet again. The transition was so subtle that I only noticed when the silence was nearly complete, the ambient sounds of wildlife fading until only our own movements disturbed the stillness. "We need to go," Kimberly whispered, her earlier curiosity replaced by renewed apprehension. "Right now." No one argued. We hastily stuffed the remaining equipment into the car, unconcerned with proper packing. As I closed the trunk, I glanced toward the tree line one final time. Though I saw nothing unusual, the forest's edge seemed to waver slightly, as if viewed through rising heat. Yet the air was cool and still. We departed with the same urgency that had marked our pre-dawn escape, though now we had the added discomfort of witnessing the clearing transform from an ordinary woodland opening to something that defied rational explanation. The forest had changed while we watched, or perhaps our perception of it had altered in some fundamental way. Whatever the case, our one shared certainty was that we would never return to that place, regardless of what we might have left behind. The drive back to the city passed in contemplative silence, each of us processing what we had experienced. By tacit agreement, we stopped at a motel just outside the national forest boundary, unwilling to continue traveling after dark. None of us felt capable of explaining our abrupt return to friends or family just yet. In our shared room, over takeout food that none of us had much appetite for, we finally attempted to construct some rational framework for what had happened. "There has to be a logical explanation," I insisted, more for my own benefit than theirs. "Maybe there's some kind of natural gas seeping from the ground there. It could explain the lights. Methane can ignite spontaneously under certain conditions, and gas exposure might have affected our perceptions." Jen considered this theory. "That might explain the lights and even our uneasiness. But what about those perfect circular marks? Or the pressure on the tent?" I had no answer for that. Each attempt at a conventional explanation faltered against some detail that refused to conform to normal understanding. What if it's not supernatural? "But it's also not anything science has properly catalogued yet," Kimberly suggested. "There are still so many things about nature we don't fully understand." This middle ground offered some comfort, a way to acknowledge the reality of our experience without venturing into territory that challenged our fundamental worldview. We weren't claiming ghosts or monsters, just an encounter with some aspect of the natural world that defied our limited understanding. "Maybe that's why the locals avoid it," Jen added. They've learned through experience that something about that place affects people negatively, even if they don't know why. As our conversation continued, I noticed Kimberly repeatedly checking her phone, scrolling through the photos she had taken during our trip. Most were typical camping snapshots from before things turned strange. Jen and me struggling with tent poles, the three of us posing by the car, the modest fire we had built. "What are you looking for?" I asked finally. She hesitated before responding. "I took a few pictures this afternoon while we were packing up. I wanted to document those circular impressions in the ground." She handed me her phone, opened to one such photo. It showed a patch of forest floor that I recognized as the area beneath my tent. But the image contained no circular depressions, just ordinary woodland soil and scattered pine needles. "That's not possible," I said, zooming in on various sections of the photo. "We all saw them. They were right there." Kimberly nodded grimly. "Every picture is like that. It's as if the marks were only visible to our direct observation." We passed the phone around, each confirming what seemed increasingly undeniable. We had shared a perception of reality that objective documentation could not capture. This realization stirred profound unease, challenging not just our experience of that particular place, but our fundamental trust in our own senses. "Maybe we should talk to someone professional," Jen suggested cautiously. "Not because we're crazy, but because this kind of experience can be destabilizing." I understood her concern. Already I found myself questioning other memories, wondering what other perceptions might have been shared illusions rather than objective reality. The implications extended far beyond one unsettling camping trip. "I keep thinking about what you said regarding the pressure on your feet," Kimberly said, addressing me directly. "It was so specific, not random, but deliberate. Like something was, I don't know, testing." Her observation articulated what had been lurking at the edges of my thoughts. Whatever had happened at that campsite had possessed a quality of intentionality that was difficult to reconcile with purely natural phenomena. Not necessarily conscious in a human sense, but purposeful in a way that random events were not. "I don't think I'll be camping again anytime soon," Jen said quietly. "Maybe ever." I reached for her hand, finding it cold despite the warm room. "We don't have to figure this out tonight. Maybe with time and distance it will make more sense." But even as I offered this reassurance, I doubted it would prove true. Some experiences resist rational categorization, existing in the uncomfortable space between what we can explain and what we undeniably perceive. A night in that forest clearing seemed destined to remain in that liminal territory, too real to dismiss, too strange to integrate into our understanding of how the world works. As we prepared for sleep in our sterile motel room, with its reassuring locks and proximity to civilization, I found myself listening for sounds beyond the routine hum of the air conditioner and distant traffic. Part of me remained alert for that distinctive, wavering cry or the measured footsteps that had circled our tent. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of circular patterns spreading across familiar landscapes, transforming them into something alien and uninhabitable. 6 months have passed since our experience in that nameless clearing off Forest Service Road 22. Outwardly, our lives have returned to normal routines, work, social obligations, the mundane rhythms of everyday existence. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy runs a current of permanent alteration, a shift in how we perceive the world and our place within it. We haven't spoken of that night as a group since our return, though occasionally Jen will wake beside me, her breathing rapid and shallow, and I know without asking that she has revisited that place in her dreams. In those moments, we hold each other in silent acknowledgement of a shared trauma that defies conventional articulation. Kimberly moved to a different city 2 months after our trip. Her farewell message mentioned a need for urban surroundings, and though she didn't explicitly connect this decision to what happened, the implication was clear. She has surrounded herself with concrete and glass. Human-made environments where nature exists only in carefully managed parks and potted plants. For my part, I've developed what might be considered an obsession, though I prefer to think of it as methodical investigation. I've spent countless hours researching similar accounts from around the world, places that people avoid without clear reason, locations where electronic equipment fails inexplicably, sites where visitors report consistent psychological effects despite no obvious environmental cause. These locations exist on every continent, in forests, deserts, mountains, and oceans. Most remain undocumented in scientific literature, their abnormalities preserved only in local knowledge and personal testimony. Yet patterns emerge when these accounts are compared, shared characteristics that suggest some common underlying phenomenon. My office walls are now covered with maps marked with these sites, annotated with details from historical records and first-hand accounts. Jen tolerates this project with concerned resignation, understanding that it represents my attempt to contextualize what happened to us, to place it within some framework that diminishes its power to disturb. Last week, I received an email from a forest ranger who had been stationed near our camping location years ago. He had found my online query about the area and offered a perspective that has continued to haunt me. Some places in the forest feel wrong because they are wrong, not in any supernatural sense, but in a deeper ecological way, like an immune response to an intrusion. We think we understand nature because we've catalogued species and mapped terrains, but there are aspects to the relationship between living systems that we've barely begun to comprehend. His words resonated with a theory I've been developing, that certain locations may represent something akin to neurological nodes in larger ecological systems, points where the complex interactions between countless organisms achieve a kind of emergent response capability, not consciousness as we understand it, but a form of systemic reaction to perceived threats, in this case human presence, in an area particularly sensitive to disruption. This theory offers cold comfort. It suggests a natural explanation for our experience, while simultaneously implying that what we encountered represents only the visible edge of profound natural processes operating beyond our awareness or comprehension. Occasionally, I consider returning to that clearing in daylight with proper equipment and multiple witnesses. The ranger I corresponded with strongly advised against this, noting that whatever happened there seems to escalate with repeated exposure. His final message included a warning that continues to resonate. Some questions are best left unanswered. Some places are best left unvisited. I've mostly heeded this advice, though I sometimes find myself tracing the route on maps, calculating driving times, imagining what a properly prepared expedition might discover. These thoughts typically come in the pre-dawn hours, when the boundary between rational thought and deeper impulses grows thin. Jen sees these moments reflected in my expression and gently steers me toward more grounded concerns. Whatever it was, she reminds me, it stays there only if we leave it there. She's right, of course. Yet part of me remains convinced that what we experienced represents something significant. A glimpse beyond the comfortable illusion that we understand the natural world and our place within it. As I write this account, partly as documentation and partly as exorcism, I'm struck by how inadequate words are to convey the fundamental wrongness we encountered. The rational mind insists on categorization, on familiar frameworks of understanding. But some experiences resist such containment, existing in the uncomfortable space between established knowledge and the vast territory of the unknown. In my dreams, I still hear that distinctive cry echoing through dark forests. I still feel the deliberate pressure targeting my exact location within the tent. I still see those perfect circular depressions that appeared in soil that should have held no such marks, yet vanished from photographic evidence. These memories retain their clarity while simultaneously suggesting something just beyond comprehension, like a word forgotten in mid-sentence, tantalizingly close, yet unreachable. Perhaps this lingering uncertainty represents the true horror of what we encountered. Not a discrete threat that can be named and therefore contained, but a fundamental challenge to our perception of reality itself. The realization that the natural world may contain aspects that actively resist human presence or understanding undermines our species' most basic assumptions about our relationship with our environment. As I conclude this record, a storm gathers outside our apartment windows. The wind through the city streets sometimes produces sounds that momentarily resemble that distinctive, wavering cry from the forest. In those moments, I find myself frozen, listening intently, wondering if what we encountered has found some way to follow us from that remote clearing into the heart of civilization. God willing, such thoughts are merely the residue of an experience not yet fully processed, psychological aftershocks from a trauma gradually fading with time. But sometimes, in the spaces between heartbeats, I remain unconvinced.